Luke and Margaret have been married for nearly 10 years and are the proud parents of two wonderful children, Billy and Tammy. They've built a beautiful life together, marked by a strong bond both inside and outside their marriage. They've always been one of those couples who are affectionate and inseparable, with Luke consistently treating Margaret with tenderness and respect. His love for her was always evident to everyone around them. Luke was the ideal husband and father, rarely going out with friends, prioritizing his family, and showing his devotion daily. However, in recent months, Luke has been feeling emotionally unsettled. Something between him and Margaret feels off, though he can't quite pinpoint what it is. These vague yet intense feelings of unease have left him in emotional turmoil, making it difficult for him to think clearly. While Luke has remained focused and capable at work, pouring more and more energy into his job, he has unintentionally begun to pull back from his daily interactions with Margaret. Despite this growing distance, he continues to shower his children with love, and Margaret still appears to be a caring and attentive mother. But something was definitely wrong between Luke and Margaret. Luke couldn't remember the last time they made love. He could easily remember the last time they screwed. He could remember how unsatisfying it was and how Margaret acted as though it was just another chore to be done around the house, similar to washing the dishes or doing the laundry. This all seemed to start shortly after his cousin from back home came to temporarily stay with them. This temporary stay had lasted over a year now, and there was no end in sight. Evan and Margaret had become almost inseparable. They had started doing more and more things together. They frequently left the house for a variety of reasons and left Luke at home to sit with the children. They would be constantly touching and sitting closely. Margaret would even sometimes cut Evan's hair for him. When Luke suggested that Margaret might like to do the same for him, her reply was short and cutting. Now Luke was a pretty smart guy. At the office, he was considered to be the brightest rising star in the company. Luke was simply a victim of the head in the sand syndrome. He refused to admit to himself that there could be any possible way Margaret could be having an affair with Evan. Luke finally could take it no longer and had eventually admitted to himself that something was drastically wrong. He decided to try to follow Margaret and Evan one evening. He hated to do it and actually felt guilty for the thoughts in his mind. They were all sitting at home watching TV one evening about 10 p.m. The children were in bed and asleep, and Margaret said, "Hey Luke, Evan and I are going to run over to Taco Bueno for a late snack. Do you want us to bring you anything?" Slowly, Luke looked at Margaret and then at Evan. "No thanks, I'm just not hungry." Margaret told Evan to get the keys to her car, and they went out the front door. Margaret said, "Don't wait up for us because we may just eat our tacos there, and then maybe drive around for a little while." Luke sat there for a long moment. His eyes were damp, his chest was on fire, and the pain in his mind was almost overpowering. Then, even though he knew it was wrong to leave his children alone in the house, he quickly went out to the side of the house where he kept his motorcycle. Starting the engine, he pulled out of the drive and went in the direction of the taco joint that Margaret had said they were going to. It was just a few miles, and then Luke pulled up in a small parking lot where he could easily see the taco stand. He looked carefully and could not see Margaret's car. "Maybe I beat them here, and I'll just wait a few minutes and then they will come." Luke sat on the bike, leaning carefully into the shadows of the building he was parked next to. He did not want Margaret to see him spying on them. She would have been furious. She seemed to get that way really easy and really quick. It had gotten to the point where Luke was afraid to talk with her. Margaret would turn into a raging bitch in a single second and rip him a new one over the slightest comment, or even worse, just ignore him. After 30 minutes, he realized that they must have gone someplace else. Nervous about leaving the children alone for long, with a deep sigh, Luke started the bike and drove slowly home. There was no car in the drive when he got there. He parked the bike on the side of the house and went into the house, checking immediately on the children to make sure all was well with them. He wandered into the living room where the TV still flickered and stared blindly at the picture. At midnight, he wearily went to bed and eventually to sleep. The next morning, sitting in the kitchen alone having coffee, he made all the necessary excuses for Margaret and Evan's actions so that he could put it out of his mind and go to work. Next week would be Luke's birthday. In the past, Margaret had done a variety of things to celebrate this day with Luke. She had planned birthday parties, romantic evenings out at 4-star restaurants, and overnight stays in nice hotels. In fact, the overnight stays in hotels was Margaret's favorite. Sex in a hotel room seemed to really get her going, and when she got going, it was really good sex. This time it was different. There were no elaborate plans for a party or night out on the town. There was no mention of the upcoming date. Nada. Zip. Zero. Zilch. Nothing. On the morning of his birthday, Luke again sat in the kitchen alone, having coffee and trying to get his head straight for the upcoming day at work. Actually, he was just pissed. How could Margaret forget this date, Luke thought. He never forgot her birthday, and sure as hell never forgot their anniversary. Damn, damn, damn. What is going on here? Luke thought to himself. He was sitting in the kitchen drinking a cup of coffee. It was still early and Margaret was sleeping as she always did until the last possible minute before jumping out of bed, dressing hurriedly and dashing out of the house on her way to work. Luke didn't know if Evan was still asleep or had already left for work. I can't believe that she actually forgot my 30th birthday. This really sucks. Luke had helped the kids get off to school. This was a regular thing for him, and he actually enjoyed it most of the time except when he thought about how nice it would be for Margaret to help. Maybe she has something planned for later and will call me at work and tell me then. Then, Luke made his transformation into his work mode where he focused on work and put all thoughts about his marriage aside for the day. He picked up his briefcase and car keys and went out the door, got into his car, and left for work. Curiously, it never crossed his mind about leaving Margaret and Evan alone together in the house. At work that day, Luke continued to focus on his job. It wasn't until almost quitting time that he remembered that it was his birthday and that Margaret had not called about any plans. Picking up his phone, he called her cell. When Margaret answered saying hi Luke, since she obviously recognized his work number on her caller ID, he asked, "Are we doing anything tonight?" Margaret paused for a second thinking, "No, I don't have anything planned." "Why are you asking?" Luke frowned and decided to play with her mind a little, just in case she was pulling his leg. "Well, something has come up here at work, and I have to stay until it's finished." "How late are you going to be?" Margaret said peevishly, since she didn't like having to take care of the kids without his help. "I don't know. But if it gets too late, I just may have to sleep on my couch here in the office." "Okay, but call me if and when you head for home, 'cause I'll worry about you driving home that late," Margaret said. "Well, I have to go now. Love you, bye," and Margaret hung up. Luke sat there just stunned for a second, then slammed the phone down on the receiver. "Well shit, I guess I am well and truly screwed now." Luke leaned back in his chair and tried to figure out just what he was going to do now, since he didn't have any work that needed his attention and now he couldn't go home because he had lied to Margaret about having to work late. As he sat there, he started to change out of his focused work mode and began to think about what he had just talked to Margaret about. She really has forgotten my birthday, or worse yet, she really doesn't care. She didn't complain about me being late and again. She really didn't seem to care if I was coming home or not. Luke started to get pissed. And then he began to think. He didn't like what he was thinking about much. He hated himself when he got like this. He couldn't put his thoughts together coherently, and his stomach started to burn like it was on fire. His heart felt like a leaden lump in his chest. His cell phone rang, and it was his mother-in-law calling. "Hello, Luke." Luke wondered why she was calling him since he could remember less than a dozen times in the last several years that she ever called him. "Hi, Luke. I was just calling to let you and Margaret know that you can bring the kids over tonight, and I'll be glad to watch them for you." "Luke, I didn't know that Margaret had decided to bring the kids over. You can call her at home or on her cell. I'm still at work and won't be getting home until late." Luke sounded puzzled though. "I thought that you and Margaret would be going out tonight." "Well, I'll just call her and find out if she still wants me to watch them. Good night, Luke, and don't work too hard on your birthday." Luke cut the connection and Luke thought, sarcastically, "Well, at least someone remembers my goddamned birthday." About 8 that evening, Luke decided to call home and just check on how the home front was doing. He wondered if the kids had gone to grandma's or not. The phone rang until the voicemail picked up, and he got to listen to the stupid recording that Margaret had insisted on putting on the machine. "Hello, you've reached Luke, Margaret, Uncle Evan, and the kids. We're not home, so just leave a message and we'll get back to you." Shit, Luke thought, I really hate that stupid recording, and I still can't figure out where she came up with Uncle Evan. He's just my cousin. Well, I might as well just go home. There is no reason now to just sit here, and there is really no actual work to be done. Luke got up from behind his desk, turned out the lights, and locked his door. Walking slowly and his head hanging down, he left the building, got into his car, and drove home. Still feeling pissed and hurt, when Luke arrived home, he decided to park in the alley behind the house, knowing that Margaret would never see his car and would assume he wasn't home yet. "Sometimes I feel like the third wheel in my own home," Luke groused to himself. Luke roamed restlessly around the house for about half-hour. Then, after getting a soda, he sat down in front of the TV and started watching a typical evening mind-numbing show about nothing. Just as the show was ending, he heard a car door shut, and he knew that Margaret and Evan were home. God damn them. I hope they had a good time on my birthday. Suddenly, without even a conscious thought, Luke jumped up and ran into the kids' bedroom and hid in the closet. What am I doing? Why the hell did I just hide in the closet? If they catch me here, I'll never in a million years be able to explain this. He heard them come in the front door, laughing and carrying and talking about how much fun their evening had been. Luke kept getting more uncomfortable in the closet, and then with as little thought as when he had first hidden, He came out of the closet and walked into the kitchen where Margaret and Evan were standing. Did they just jump apart? Is that a guilty look on their faces? Am I losing my mind? All these thoughts went through his mind at the speed of light, and then immediately Luke felt guilty about having thoughts like this about Margaret. He knew that there was no way that Margaret would be fooling around with Evan. What are you doing here? When did you get home? Margaret almost shouted at Luke. I've been home about an hour and I was in the back when I heard you come in. I'm a little hungry. Is there anything for dinner? Margaret said I didn't make any dinner since I knew you wouldn't be home, and Evan and I just ran out and got something quick to eat. Luke asked where are the kids? Even though he knew, but he wanted for some perverse reason to hear what Margaret would say. They are at my mom's. She had called and asked if she could have them for the night, and they do love their grandma, so I said okay. Now why would she lie about that? Luke thought, this is just hard. I can't seem to think straight right now, and I'm suddenly so tired I can hardly stand. I'm tired, and I'm going to bed, he told them. As he left the room, he grumbled loud enough for Margaret to hear. What a really crappy birthday this has been for me. Luke didn't see the look on Margaret's face as he walked from the room, and frankly at that moment, he flat didn't give a shit either. In looking back, he could only hope that she had shown some guilt, but he never knew. Over the next several months, things just kept getting worse. He and Margaret had not made love for over 2 months, and he was really beginning to think that she no longer wanted him. They never talked, and Margaret really had begun to just ignore him, yet at the same time, she and Evan always seemed to have something to chat about. The whole situation was just driving him crazy, and if it hadn't been for his children, there would not have been any reason to even come home, and he honestly felt that he would not be missed. Then Luke came home and saw a new car parked in the driveway. Wonder who that belongs to? Luke admired the car as he walked past it and into the house. He saw Margaret and Evan sitting in the kitchen, and he could tell that they were both excited. Look, did you see Evan's new car? Margaret said excitedly. Isn't it beautiful? And Evan got a really good deal. The salesman was so nice and really helped with everything so that Evan could buy the car. In fact, since Evan's credit wasn't quite good enough, he let me sign as his co-signer in your name so we could close the deal today. Isn't that just wonderful? Luke was stunned. He opened and closed his mouth and couldn't get a single sound out. Finally, he said, what the hell did you do that for? Did you lose your stupid mind or something? Did it even occur to you to call me and ask about this first before you put my name on a contract? Margaret, with a shocked look on her face, said, why are you yelling at me? I didn't do anything wrong. I knew that you would say yes, so I just did it. It's done, and you might as well get over it. With anger in his eyes and a stone face, Luke wheeled to Evan and grated, give me keys now, Evan. Although a bigger man than Luke, let a little fear show in his eyes as he handed the keys to the new car to Luke. Without another word, Luke turned and left the house. He got in the car and immediately drove it back to the car lot. He pulled into the lot, got out of the car, and walked into the office. Looking around, he saw a salesman and saying, here are the keys to that new car out front. My wife signed my name to a contract illegally, and I'm not going to honor the contract. The salesman started to sputter and angrily said, hey, I've got a signed contract and I'm not taking the car back. It's your car, and get it off my lot before I have it towed. Do you think I'm stupid, you dumb shit? I know all about the 72-hour rule, and I know that I can return the car, and you can't do a thing about it. Luke's voice kept getting louder and louder. Now get that goddamn piece of shit contract out here now, so I can tear it to shreds. Now, Luke shouted at the top of his voice. The salesman's face paled and he turned and scurried into the office, returning almost immediately, and with a shaking hand, gave Luke the contract. Calmly, Luke said, thank you. Can I use your phone to call for a ride? Luke called home, and Margaret answered the phone. Come pick me up at the car lot, Luke said tersely, and hung up. It was amazing because there was never a mention from Margaret or Evan about the car. It wasn't until several days later that Luke realized that Evan did not get his $500 down payment back from the dealership. He never asked about it and really hoped that Evan had lost his money. About a month later, Luke was sitting at his desk trying unsuccessfully to work when his boss Frank came in and sat down. Hi, Luke. How's it going? Doing okay, boss. What's up, Luke? The company has a real problem in our Honolulu office. Things have really gotten out of hand, and we are about to lose all our business over there. I need a go-to kind of guy to go over there and straighten out the whole mess. Who do you think would be the best guy for the job? It will take several months to turn it around. Luke leaned back in his chair and then could not believe the words coming out of his mouth. Frank, there is only one person who can do this job, and that person is me. I will go over there and take care of it, but you're going to have to make it worth my while. You know it will be a personal hardship for me being away from the wife, and especially the kids. Frank looked at Luke and said, I hoped you would say that. I agree that you are the only one that I think can do the job, and I'm glad that you volunteered instead of me just assigning you to the task. Give me a couple of days to take care of some personal business, and I'll leave on Monday. Luke said, Later that day, as he drove home, he wondered how in the hell he was going to explain to Margaret that he was going to Hawaii for several months and was leaving on Monday. This was going to be very interesting. Arriving home, he parked in the drive and walked into the house. Seeing Margaret in the kitchen, he said, "Hi, honey, I'm home." As the words came out of his mouth, he realized that he could not remember the last time he had said those words to his wife. God, what has our marriage come to mean to each of us? I still love her, but honestly, I don't really know her anymore. I'm not sure I even like her as a friend. After sitting down at the table while Margaret continued preparing dinner, Luke continued chatting with Margaret about work, the kids, and other household general items. Finally, Luke just blurted out, "I have to go to Honolulu. The office there is a real mess, and Frank asked me to go over there and straighten things out. It's going to take several months." Margaret stared at Luke with her mouth hanging open. "When the hell did you find this out, and when are you leaving?" "I have plane reservations for early Monday morning, and I'll need you or Evan to take me to the airport." Finally, Luke just blurted out, "I have to go to Honolulu. The office there is a real mess, and Frank asked me to go over there and straighten things out. It's going to take several months." Margaret stared at Luke with her mouth hanging open. "When the hell did you find this out, and when are you leaving?" "I have plane reservations for early Monday morning, and I'll need you or Evan to take me to the airport." Margaret just stood there with her mouth literally hanging open. What did he just say? Did you just say that you were leaving for Hawaii Monday morning? Where in all holy hell did that just come from? Margaret staggered over to the kitchen table, plopped into the nearest chair. Gasping, she said, "Could you please just start over and explain what is going on?" Luke told Margaret about the job in Hawaii and how his boss had told him that he was the only one to go there and fix all that was going wrong. Not being totally stupid, he didn't tell her that he had volunteered. "Luke, how can you go off and leave me here alone with the kids? What will I do? It's not fair. You can't go." Margaret's voice kept getting stronger and louder with each syllable. "You are not leaving me here by myself," she shouted angrily. Slamming his fist on the table, Luke shouted back, "You're not here by yourself. God damn it, your buddy Evan is here. The way you two are such buddy-buddy all the time. You will never even miss me except when you want a babysitter." More quietly, he said, "Just get over it, Margaret. I'm going, it's my job. You will be just fine without me." Wearily, Luke stood and walked into the bedroom where he began packing his clothes into a suitcase from the closet. That night, Margaret kept distance between them in bed, but that didn't seem strange to him since they had been sleeping just like that for more months than he could remember. The next morning and for the rest of the weekend, the chill coming from Margaret was almost thick enough to slice with a knife. Luke spent his time with the children, playing and explaining why he had to leave for a while, but that he loved them and would come home again when the job was done. They all cried a little, but in the end, they accepted his leaving as necessary. Margaret and Luke only spoke to each other when absolutely necessary. Monday morning came all too soon, and since, as it turned out, neither Margaret nor Evan seemed to have any spare time, Luke took a cab to the airport. Margaret was still so angry with him that she didn't even get out of bed until after he left. No goodbye hug or kiss for him. But Luke had to be honest. She hadn't shown him any real affection for a long, long time. Later that same morning, Margaret sat quietly out on the back patio. She was feeling a little sad but couldn't put her finger on exactly why. "Well, he's gone. I didn't even get out of bed and say goodbye. Why didn't I? I was awake and I heard him moving around before he left. Why couldn't I have taken him to the airport? I could have spent those last minutes with him. I do care about him, and I do honestly love him." Then it dawned on her again, as it had so many times in the last several months. Do I honestly love him? Would he honestly believe that I still love him with all my heart if he knew about Evan and me? If I can't be honest with him, at least I should be honest with myself. Then Margaret started crying softly, hugging herself and thinking, do I still love my husband? I don't know. I know that I love what I have with Evan. The sex is really good, boy. Can he really ring my bell? Is Evan a better lover than Luke? Damn, it's been so long since Luke has made love to me. I can't even remember the last time. Margaret suddenly realized why she was a little sad. I miss Luke. She was actually surprised with that revelation. Why do I miss him already? He just left this morning. For the first time in months, she was thinking about her relationship with her husband. We haven't been close for a long time now. We are just two people living in the same house. He hasn't kissed me or hugged me in so long, and again I still can't remember when we last made love. I can remember all too well the last several times Evan and I screwed. Why can't I remember anything like that about Luke? After all, he is my husband. Over the next several months, Margaret would find herself having this same conversation with herself time and again. She would ask herself questions such as, do I still love Luke? Does Luke still love me? Has Luke had an affair or any flings? Do I love Evan? Does Evan really love me? Is what Evan and I have just great sex? What happened to the great sex Luke and I used to have? When did Luke and I drift apart? When he comes home, what will happen? The one question that seemed to bother her most was, has Luke had sex with another woman since their marriage? That question really pissed her off and seemed to leave a deep ache in her heart. But the one thing that Margaret was sure of in her heart was that Luke was being faithful to her. Margaret was just as selfish to ask herself what she was going to do about her long-time affair with Evan and what the affair had done and was still doing to her marriage to Luke. She refused to even think about, much less consider, the damage that would be caused to Luke, the children, her parents, Luke's parents, their friends, etc., etc. Whenever she thought about Evan, the only things that came to mind were the really excellent sex and the delicious feeling of putting something over on Luke. That seemed to be one of the things that made sex with Evan so intense and delicious. 8 hours later, Luke walked through the open-air terminal in Honolulu, Hawaii. My God, the air is so fresh and clean, and look at all these people. They all look so happy and excited. After gathering his bags, Luke took a taxi to the long-term resident hotel where he would be hanging his hat for the next several months. As he was putting his clothing away, he heard a knocking at the door. Who could that be? I don't know anyone that would want to see me here. Hell, I don't know anyone here at all. Opening the door, he saw a very attractive brown-skinned woman. That was all he could notice as she pushed past him into his apartment. Hey, you must be Luke. I'm Kelly, your new secretary, driver, guide, and main person Friday. So how you doing? She said all that in a single rush without taking a single breath. Hi, Kelly. Yes, I'm Luke, and I'm doing fine so far as I just arrived here in Honolulu. Frank, your boss, called me and told me to meet you at the airport, but I guess I missed you, but I knew you were staying here, so I just hustled over here. I'm supposed to take you to dinner tonight, and then I'll be picking you up in the morning to take you to work. I'll be doing that until you can get your own car to drive. From that point on, for the entire time that Luke was in Hawaii, Kelly was all those things to him, and many times even more than that. She was a thoroughly delightful, attractive, and honest woman. Luke felt that having Kelly as his secretary and everything else was a true blessing, and she was a major contributing factor in his success in his new position. 6 months later, Luke sat at his desk on the last day of his assignment in Honolulu. The job had been hard, very hard, and routinely at the beginning worked 70, 80, and even 90 hours a week, although that had slowed in the end to an easy 40 to 60 hours each week in the end. Frank, in their last phone conversation, had crowed about what a great job Luke had done and how happy the CEO was with his performance. Frank assured Luke that there would be a large bonus and probably an equally large raise when he returned home. But work wasn't all that happened to Luke in the last 6 months. Slowly, as he became more accustomed to his duties in his new job, Luke began a slow change in his own personality. He became more confident in himself, and because of that, he began to interact more easily with everyone around him. Kelly had made it her crusade to make sure that every spare minute of Luke's time was spent learning the islands and the lifestyle that no mainlanders could ever begin to understand and appreciate. She also introduced him to the main form of entertainment in Hawaii. Going to the beach was the most common way of fun for families and singles alike, and Luke took to it like, pardon the pun, a fish to water. Swimming, fishing, surfing, partying, it all happened at the beaches. One day, about a month after Luke had come to the islands, he and Kelly with some friends of hers were just hanging at the beach. Kelly looked at Luke and said, "Luke, can I ask you a personal question?" Answering her, "You can ask me any question you want, but I pick the ones I want to answer. You talk a lot about your kids, but you don't hardly mention your wife, and I was curious about why." Kelly, "I don't talk much about my wife because, well, there's really not much to say. We are not close and haven't been that way for a couple of years now." Luke's face seemed to harden, and his expression became harder to read. "Margaret and I seem to lose interest somewhere, and I'm not sure just exactly when and how it happened. I only speak to her about once a week, and then we just talk about the kids and daily household stuff. Sometimes she talks about her job, but the conversations are fairly short, and I think that she is just as glad to hang up as I am since we don't have much else to say. Well, how about the old-fashioned stuff like saying I love you or miss you, and even maybe some good phone sex?" Kelly asked. "Kelly, that's a little personal, but I can't remember the last time I heard Margaret say I love you or show me any kind of affection. I sure haven't heard anything like that since I came to the islands. Before I left the mainland, we were really just roommates. If we didn't have the kids, I'm sure that one of us would have split long before now. Anyway, Margaret and her buddy, Evan, seem to enjoy each other's company much more than she enjoys mine." Kelly got a strange look on her face, looked at Luke, and suddenly changed the subject. Next thing, everyone was telling stories about the trouble some of them got into when they were younger and single. There was a lot of laughing and good-natured ribbing, but Luke noticed that Kelly didn't have much to say. She sat off to one side, and he could tell she was doing some serious thinking about something. Later that evening, Luke was dropping Kelly off at her apartment. "Look, do you want to come up for a minute? I can put some coffee on if you like. There's something I'd like to talk with you about." Luke had come to know Kelly fairly well in the short time they had known each other, so he had learned to be a little cautious about her famous "something I'd like to talk about" sessions. But he really had nothing better to do. It was the weekend, and for a change, he had no plans to work until Monday. "Okay, Kelly, I'll come up, but if the shit gets too deep, I'm going to run for home as quick as I can." "Come on, Luke. Don't be such a chicken shit." Sitting at the kitchen table, Luke and Kelly sipped on their coffee. Luke just sat there waiting on Kelly to start the game. She had something she wanted to talk about, and was obviously wrestling with how to get it out on the table. "Luke, I know that you're not happy with your marriage, and you have implied that it's been a long time since you've had your ashes hauled." "Whoa, wait a minute," Luke blurted. "Where are you going with this? I don't think my sex life is the topic du jour." "Come on, Luke. I've been watching you for over a month now, and while you will look at the girls, you don't show the slightest interest in going any further than that. Damn, you act like a frigging monk. Does your pencil have any lead in it?" "Kelly, I can't believe you just called me a pencil, Willie." Luke laughed and said, "What is this all about? I'm starting to get a little nervous here, so just spit it out because I'm tired and ready to head for the barn and call it a night." "Look, do you have any idea what's happening back home? Do you? Let me tell what I hear from you. You don't have any idea what's coming out of your mouth. Well, I'm here to tell you that from all that I hear from you, your wife Margaret is screwing Evan and Evan is screwing your wife Margaret." The look on Luke's face would have been priceless except for the fact that anyone could see the sudden realization of the words that Kelly had just spoken. Slamming his hand on the table, he lurched to his feet. "What the hell? Who the hell?" he sputtered. "Just who do you think you are?" he roared, suddenly so angry that he had trouble breathing. Kelly just sat there calmly looking up at Luke. Softly she said, "I'm sorry, Luke. I could be dead wrong, but I'm telling you I see all the classic signs of a cheating spouse, and don't forget, the husband in this case is the last to know. I'll bet you can't tell me the last time you slept with your wife, and I'll also bet that she doesn't know either. Evan is not just her buddy, he is her sex buddy, and from what I hear from you, he's been her sex buddy for at least a year, probably longer." Luke collapsed back onto his chair, the look on his face rapidly changing from anger to looking like someone had just ripped his heart from his chest. Suddenly concerned, Kelly jumped up and ran around the table to Luke. "Are you okay? I'm so sorry. I thought that you knew at least something. This is my entire fault because I'm so stupid. This has been a total shocker to you, and I'm to blame for everything." Kelly broke into tears and ran into the bedroom. Luke just sat there, his body and his mind totally numb. After a few minutes, he rose and slowly walked out of Kelly's apartment, got into his car and drove back to his hotel. Arriving at his apartment, he walked into the kitchen, got a bottle of Crown Royal out of the cupboard, got a glass from the counter and slumped into a chair at the table. He tried and tried, but just couldn't get his mind around what Kelly had blurted out to him earlier that evening. Finally, he just sat there drinking his Crown, and that's where Kelly found him the next morning. Luke's mind slowly began to work when he smelled the coffee. Damn, I don't remember making any coffee, but I sure could use some. His head was splitting, and his red-rimmed eyes could barely focus. "I can't believe you drank the whole damn thing," Kelly said cheerily. "I bet your head is killing you. Look, I'm so sorry about last night. I had no idea that it was going to hit you so hard." Luke looked at her and slowly shook his head side to side. "Do you really think that she is cheating on me? I know what you said, and I've been thinking most of the night about it, and every time I add 2 and 2, I come up with 5 or 7 or some other shit that just doesn't make any sense. But I think that maybe you've hit the nail directly on the head because I can think of so many times that she has been obviously closer to him than to me. I just can't believe that I never once thought that she could do something like this to me." Luke paused and stood up from the table. "I need a shower and some clean clothes. I'll be back in a minute. Kelly, please don't leave. I need to talk some more and try to figure out just what to do about this crap." After his shower, Luke and Kelly talked for most of the morning. "Kelly, I can't thank you enough for sitting here with me and listen to me whine about poor me. I'm really grateful for all that you do for me. You've been a great friend and still the best secretary I could ever ask for. I guess what I believe is that Margaret is cheating on me. I also believe that at least one of her lovers is Evan. I believe that she has been running around behind my back for at least a year, but probably longer. I also know that while I'm over here, there's really not much I can do about the whole mess." Luke smiled ruefully and said, "You know what the strangest thing is, that while I am hurt and angry, I'm not as hurt or as angry as I should be. I guess it's no longer as important now as it would have been last year, or even last month. So what am I going to do? Absolutely nothing. I'm going to be here in Hawaii for the next several months, and I'm going to have a little fun of my own. Kelly smiled at Luke and couldn't resist asking, "Could I help you a little with some of the fun? You may not realize it, but I think you're a great guy, and I think that I've got a huge crush on you. We may not click, but I sure would like to give us a chance to see how we mesh. Let's just take it easy, Kelly. You're a good friend, so let's just take it easy and let things just happen naturally." Then Kelly and Luke did the one thing guaranteed to put them in a good mood. They went to the beach for the rest of the day. After that day, they just seemed to drift closer together. First a little kissing and hugging, followed by some light petting, and eventually some heavy necking. It wasn't until after Luke's second month in Hawaii that they finally slept together. It really just seemed to happen naturally. That evening they had returned from the beach to Luke's apartment, and it was one of those smooth, natural things that made both of them so comfortable with a final ending in Luke's bed. "I should be a little nervous," Luke said laughingly. "It's been several months for me, so I hope that I can make you a happy, satisfied woman tonight." "Shut up, Luke, and let's just enjoy what we have here tonight." They kissed, and the kiss became more passionate with each passing minute. They had sex. Laughing lightly, Luke said, "Kelly, that was wonderful. I feel so good, and I hope that we can do this again real soon. Luke, you are a fantastic, caring lover. I think that Margaret has really screwed up, and I'm going to take every advantage that I can. If you make love to me like this all the time, then the bitch isn't going to get you back if I can help it." After they lay there for a few minutes enjoying the afterglow, Kelly suggested a shower, and they ran to the shower where, after much fun and a lot of soap, they made love one more time. That night, they slept in each other's arms and slept thoroughly satisfied. The next day at work, they tried unsuccessfully to maintain a professional manner between them, but time after time they would catch themselves grinning at each other. Of course, everyone else in the office saw the same things, and they was each and every one of them glad. The next day at work, they tried unsuccessfully to maintain a professional manner between them, but time after time they would catch themselves grinning at each other. Of course, everyone else in the office saw the same thing, and they were each and every one of them glad. Margaret was sitting alone in the den with the lights down low. The TV was on, but basically just for background noise. She has just finished the weekly obligatory phone call with Luke. It had now been 3 months since he had gone to Hawaii, and he hadn't been back even one time for a weekend visit. Based on the just completed phone call, she got the distinct impression that except for the kids, he didn't really give a shit about ever coming back. He had talked with the kids each week, but they were so wrapped up in their friends and activities that they really hadn't missed their dad much except when they wanted something from him. As long as they could get it from their mom, they didn't miss him much at all. They were good kids, but as all children at that age seemed to be, they were very self-centered and quite selfish. But then they seemed to come by that honestly, since their mother frequently displayed those same characteristics towards their dad. Margaret was a good mom for the most part. The children were well fed, clothed, and she gave them reasonable amounts of parental supervision. Unfortunately, she seemed often distracted as well. Margaret's problem was quite simple, really. She couldn't seem to make up her mind about Evan or Luke. Those same questions that had bothered her when Luke had first left for Hawaii still plagued her on a frequent basis. Do I still love Luke? Does Luke still love me? Has Luke had an affair or any flings? Do I love Evan? Does Evan really love me? Is what Evan and I have just great sex? What happened to the great sex Luke and I used to have? When did Luke and I drift apart? When he comes home, what will happen? The one question that seemed to bother her most was, has Luke had sex with another woman since their marriage? Well, some of the questions had some answers such as, yes, I still love Luke, and since he has been gone, I miss him more every day. I'm beginning to think that Luke doesn't love me anymore since his phone calls seem to be so impersonal and even cold. Additionally, since he has made no effort to come home for even a short visit, despite me and the children asking time and again, seems to be a strong indicator as well. Also, with the frequency of bitch, Kelly's name that comes up in our very short conversations, I have come to think very strongly that he's screwing her at very regular intervals. Remember, it's okay for me to have my Evan, but if he's screwing around on me, then he's really, really dead meat, and I really, really mean that. It makes me practically insane just to think about it. I have come to the conclusion that what Evan and I have is simply very, very good sex. However, other than that, with all the time I have been able to spend with him since Luke left, I have found him to be basically a very simple-minded man. Other than the sex, we seem to have absolutely nothing in common. Let's face, he's flat-ass boring. I have also come to the realization that I know when, and also why Luke and I have drifted apart. I have been so stupid and callous to my own husband. My affair with Evan is the sole reason for the fact that my marriage is on the rocks. Actually, I am the sole reason that my marriage is on the rocks. I can look back and see that I shut him out. I have given to another man that which I promised under oath to God to give only and forever to my husband. I look in the mirror and wonder, Just who in the hell is that woman that I'm putting makeup on each morning? I don't even recognize my own face, and I don't like what I see. Actually, I hate what I see. If and when my husband comes back home, I'm going to do my very best to make it up to him. I'm going to show him that I'm the best thing that ever happened to him. I'm going to love him and make love to him as often as he'll let me. The only question is, when is he coming home, and how and when do I get rid of Evan? I'm so lonely without Luke. Evan is the only thing that I have to turn to when the nights are so long. I'm really starting to hate what we are doing, but I haven't been able to stop. Soon, very soon. Maybe, somehow, I'm going to have to figure out what to do about Kelly bitch. I don't know how, since they are so far away. Maybe I can find some cheap airfare and surprise Luke on a long weekend. I'm really going to have to work on that since I am not giving up. Margaret was absolutely amazed and quite surprised at how lonely she had become since Luke's departure. The kids were so busy with their own lives, and Evan had turned out to be good for really just one thing: sex. I think about that the wonderful talks that Luke and I used to have pre-Evan are what I miss the most. We were so close and he was so attentive and loving to me. We talked and cuddled. We laughed and loved. What have I done? Luke was my soulmate, my one true love. We are supposed to grow old together. The way things are going, the only thing we may be doing together is going to court for our divorce. A pain so sharp and deep tore through Margaret's heart. Divorce? We can't get a divorce. We love each other. Nothing is so bad that we can't get past it. With a sinking heart, Margaret was forced to admit to herself that what she had done to Luke was the one thing that, if Luke found out, they couldn't get past it. She was suddenly forced to recognize that what she had done and was still doing was the nail that shut forever the coffin lid on her marriage. That was the wake-up call that got her attention. Evan must go now and Luke must never know. It never dawned on her that it was most likely to little and wait a late. She slowly rose to her feet and took herself off to bed. More amazement came to her when she realized that there were tears coursing down her cheeks. She felt so sad and heartbroken that she had trouble taking a full breath. The next night, after Margaret and Evan had finished screwing, they lay side by side breathing heavily. It had been a real marathon screwing session. Margaret had decided that she was going to give Evan one final farewell sex, and she wanted to make sure that they got their money's worth. Christ, Margaret, where did that come from? Well, old buddy, sex buddy, that was our final hurrah. The last coming, so to speak. Margaret laughed a little bitterly with that pun. We are done and this is finally it. This affair is over and done with, and I don't ever want to see or speak with you again. Evan casually lifted himself on his elbow and looked Margaret straight in the eye. I have watched you thinking about this for the last few weeks. That's really what I figured tonight was all about, and so I'm not surprised. I am also really relieved. I had thought this thing with you, and I would have been over months ago. Frankly, I was getting a little tired of you, and I'm sure that you feel the same. It was starting to get a little stale on the mattress. I guess now that you've had your fun, you are going to run back to hubby and make like things are a-okay, and then you are going to try to pretend to yourself and Luke that this never happened. Right? You know, Margaret, I really like you. You're fun and a great lay in the sack. However, you are more stupid than I could ever believe if you think that Luke doesn't know about us. Come on, girl. Since he left for Hawaii, he hasn't had more than 2 minutes for you, and from what you say, those minutes have been pretty damn cool. I'm curious as to how you're going to try and convince him otherwise. Margaret's face turned hateful as she spat, "Get out, Evan, and get out right now. Go and oh, don't forget. Don't ever come back." Without a word, Evan got up from the bed, got dressed, and with one last look at Margaret, walked out the door forever without a single word. Margaret sat there, naked on the soiled and rumpled sheets for a moment, and then she began to cry with deep, heart-wrenching sobs, and she realized that Evan was probably right on the state of her marriage with Luke. She cried, and it took most of the night before she was able to calm down enough to function on a limited basis. The children couldn't help but notice their mom's reserved behavior for days following Evan's departure. They also noticed Evan's continued absence and were glad that he was gone. Parents just don't understand that their children are not blind, deaf, and dumb. Luke and Kelly were lying on the bed, cuddling following some slow, loving sex. Evan's gone. Margaret told me today that he has moved away. I didn't really have anything to say about it. She seemed surprised that I had no comment. It really seemed strange since I'm not sure that I really care. Kelly looked at Luke with sorrowful eyes. You know, that's the dumbest thing I have ever heard you say. The one thing that I am more certain of is that you still love Margaret. Surprise was evident on Luke's face as she continued. I have tried everything I can think of, and I have never been able to convince myself that you love me. I know that you care for me. I know that you care a lot. You are so kind, so gentle, and so loving, but when you look at me, all I see is fondness. I don't see any real love. Kelly, I do love you. In fact, I was planning on asking you to marry me just as soon as I can get a divorce. I don't love Margaret anymore, and I can't forgive her for what she had done to our marriage. Kelly took Luke's face in her hands and softly said, "What have we been doing for the last months? Luke, you'll be leaving to go home soon. You'll be going home to your wife and your children. I can't do anything about that. I do want you to know that I will never forget our time together, but it's over. I know it, and if you'll think about it, you know it also. Luke, this is our last night together. Tomorrow, I'm submitting my resignation, effective immediately. I have taken a job in Seattle, and I would love for you to take me to the airport in the afternoon." With tears in their eyes, Luke and Kelly began to make sorrowful and loving caresses that would eventually end in the sweetest and most poignant love they ever made to each other. 2 weeks later, Luke sat at his desk on the last day of his assignment in Honolulu. He had his tickets in hand, and a driver was waiting to take him to the airport. Kelly and Margaret were both very much on his mind. The last few phone calls he had with Margaret had seemed to be different in a way that was hard for him to put a finger on exactly what the change was. Margaret had actually seemed to want to talk, actually have a conversation. She also tried in a roundabout way to ask questions about Kelly. When Luke told her that Kelly had moved to Seattle, he could actually hear the relief in Margaret's voice. Oh well, maybe that was strange and odd, but Luke was tired of all the crap, and he honestly felt that he didn't care enough to try to work out what Margaret was up to. A few hours later, Luke was on his way to the mainland and back to his family. 8 hours later, he walked out of the air terminal and right into the arms of his family. It seemed as though Margaret and both the kids were trying to hug and kiss him all at once, and they were so anxious that they actually got in each other's way. Wow, I know the kids missed me, but Margaret seemed glad to see me also. I guess since Evan has left town, she doesn't have anyone else but me. I guess I'm the here until she finds his replacement. Luke was not surprised that he didn't feel any great affection for Margaret. The several months of separation and the time that he had with Kelly had really helped him come to grips with Margaret's affair with Evan. Although it still hurt and at times made him very angry, he no longer felt that Margaret had any claim on him and no right to dictate his actions. After arriving at home, the kids eventually accepted his return and went off to attend to their various activities, leaving Luke and Margaret alone for the first time in months. "Luke, can I get you anything like a drink or something?" Luke was so unaccustomed to Margaret wanting to do anything for him that he was momentarily at a loss for words. "Yes, I would like a soda, thanks." Margaret returned almost immediately with his drink and sat beside him on the couch. She cuddled up to him and laid her head on his shoulder. "I am so glad that you are home again. I can't believe how much I have missed you." With feeling she said, "I love you so much and I don't ever want to be apart from you again." Did she just say that she loved me? Holy shit, Batman. That's the biggest crock of shit I've heard in years. Am I supposed to say that I love her also? I don't think so. Honey, the kids are in their rooms for the night. Would you like to join me in our bedroom? I have been waiting for so long to welcome you home in a proper wifely manner, she giggled lightly. The thought of making love to Margaret was actually repugnant to Luke. "Margaret, I'm really tired. I didn't sleep on the airplane at all, and I'm just completely beat. Let's just call it a night and go to bed and sleep." Did I hear that right? Did he just turn down sex with me? I hope that he is really tired and that it's not something else, she thought. "Okay, sweetheart, but I do want some serious cuddling at least." Shortly, they went off to bed. Luke went to sleep almost immediately, but Margaret spent more than 2 hours lying beside him thinking again about all the questions that had plagued her off and on for the last several months. For the next week, Margaret used every trick that she could think of to get Luke to make love to her. However, Luke was able to barely evade her by leaving for work early and getting back home as late as possible and then pleading either being too tired, a headache, or feeling ill. Margaret was becoming very frustrated and more ill at ease with each passing day. Luke was also becoming more jittery each day. He definitely did not want to have sex with Margaret for 2 reasons. One, that he could not get the picture of her and Evan out his head, and 2, since he was not sure how many sex partners she may have had, he did not want to risk STD exposure. Finally, that Friday evening, Margaret was determined to get laid by Luke. "Look, I really want to make love to you, and I'm not taking any kind of excuse. We have not made love with each other for months, and I'm not putting it off another moment." Margaret gave Luke her most seductive smile and took him by the hand, attempting to lead him off to the bedroom. Luke simply did not budge, and with surprise and hurt on her face, Margaret turned to Luke. "What's wrong?" "Luke, you have to talk to me. I need to know what's going on here." "Margaret, come sit down," Luke said. "We need to talk." With those words, Margaret's heart dropped like a stone, and she felt a fear in her chest like nothing before in her life. "Margaret, we need to cut out the bullshit in our relationship. I know about Evan. Stunned, she blurted out, what about Evan? Luke, what are you saying? Come on, how dumb do you really think I am? Angrily, Luke continued, all this crap that you are putting on me now. You are acting all love and kisses with me now, and months before when I left you acted as though you could have cared less about me except as a babysitter for you and Evan. I'll admit that I hid my head in the sand so long that I got sand fleas, but getting away from you gave me the chance to get my head on straight. Holding his hand up to Margaret, he kept her from interrupting and he continued, I know about you and Evan. You can't deny it, and any lies you make up will just piss me off even more, so don't even try to go there. I know your affair lasted over a year. I don't know, or even want to know any details. I just don't care enough anymore about you to go to the trouble of finding out the details. As his anger began to take hold, his words now were made to hurt. He wanted somehow to make her feel some of the emotion that he had to deal with. Margaret, your actions have ended our marriage. I don't know what I did to make you go to another man's bed. I have racked my brains until I want to scream, but I can't find any one thing that made me such a bad husband. Again, Margaret tried to interrupt, and again Luke simply told her to shut up and listen for once in her life. Continuing, he said, while I believe that I still love you, I don't think that I love you enough to want to continue in this marriage. I also don't believe that you really love me. You don't treat the one that you love like you have treated me for the last few years. You have treated me with contempt and disrespect. How could I possibly want to remain married to you? Margaret was stunned and speechless. He knows about Evan? How? When? How long? Luke took her silence as an opportunity to continue. You don't love me. I also do not want to sleep with you. How do I know who you have slept with? And I sure as hell don't want to take the chance of getting any sexually transmitted disease from you. I don't even want to sleep in the same bed with you. I'm going to move into the spare bedroom where I plan to stay until I can find my own place and start the divorce proceedings. Finally, Margaret was able to marshal her thoughts. Luke, I had no idea that you knew about Evan. I'm not going to try to lie to you, but I want you to know that he is the only man I have been with since our marriage. I also want you to know that we did not have a long affair. It was only for a short time after you left for Hawaii, and that is why I made him move away. I just couldn't bear to be around him because I felt so guilty, she lied. Luke kept his mouth shut, deciding to see just how deep she would dig the hole that he was going to bury her in. I still love you with all my body and soul, she said, and I was just so lonely, and I don't love Evan. It was just sex. He is certainly not a better lover than you. Luke glared at her. You are so shallow and such a liar. You don't even have the guts to admit the truth. You always have to try to make yourself look better somehow, no matter how dirty or sordid the facts really are. Who are you, and what have you done to the woman that I fell in love with and married? How could I possibly consider trying to put us back together when you are such a dishonest person? I'm supposed to be your mate. You are supposed to be truthful with me in all things, yet you can sit there and lie to me with a straight face. You know that I know, and yet you still can't tell me the truth. You have totally destroyed any faith and respect that I have ever had for you. Margaret just sat there totally speechless. She had never heard Luke talk to her this way in all the years they had been together. She was so much in shock that her mind was numb. Luke stood up, suddenly so tired that he could barely function. I've had enough fun for tonight, he said sarcastically. I'm going to bed, but I have one request for you. Please, for the remainder of the time that I'm in this house, I want desperately to be civil about this. I will treat you with respect and kindness in front of the children, and want you to treat me the same way also. Other than that, I have no reason to speak with you, and I can't imagine any reason for you to speak with me. With that said, Luke left and began to move his clothing and toilet articles to the spare bedroom. After Luke had moved, Margaret finally was able to rouse herself and go to what was now her bedroom. She spent the entire night awake, trying to understand just exactly how her world had so suddenly and completely collapsed. He still loves me, but not enough to remain married to me. Those words spun around and around in her mind. In the back of her mind, Margaret had been aware of the terrible way that she had been treating Luke. She had simply thought that once the affair was over, she could go back to Luke, and their marriage would simply go on as it had before her affair. She had known that Luke's love was strong enough that no matter what happened, he would never leave her. How could she have ever underestimated her husband so completely? In the back of her mind, Margaret had been aware of the terrible way that she had been treating Luke. She had simply thought that once the affair was over, she could go back to Luke, and their marriage would simply go on as it had before her affair. She had been absolutely sure that Luke's love was strong enough that no matter what happened, he would never leave her. How could she have ever underestimated her husband so completely? Margaret was so upset and destroyed by the rage and hatred that Luke had spewed at her. Oh my God, he really hates me. And then, Of course he hates me. Look what I've done. How I've hurt him. She simply sat at the table for over an hour after Luke had gone off to the spare bedroom. Eventually, she rose slowly and went off to bed for the night. Surprisingly, once they were able to get to sleep, they both slept soundly and without dreams. The next morning, they easily slipped into the routine of getting the kids off to school and themselves off to work. They drove separate cars and did not share a lunch. Arriving home from work, they again worked together to get through the evening with the children and then went off to their separate bedrooms so as not to share a room with each other. Luke was amazed that he felt such anger towards Margaret. The thing that stuck in his craw was her transparent attempt using sex in trying to return to the state of their marriage prior to her affair. She was just going screw me and pretend that since she thought I knew nothing, all would be as good as new. How could she possibly imagine that her behavior would simply go poof and disappear forever? She thinks that she knows me so well while in fact, she doesn't really know me anymore at all. With Kelly's help, I have changed so much in the last 6 months. I am ashamed of my behavior where I allowed Margaret to walk all over me and actually flaunt her relationship with Evan. I can only swear to myself that I will never allow her or anyone else to treat me with such disdain and disrespect. He was quite content to coexist with Margaret for now, and after thinking things through, he had decided that as long as they could do so reasonably, he would remain in the house instead of seeking out an apartment. He would be better able to use that money for lawyer and court fees for the divorce. A few days later, he discussed this idea with Margaret, and she had no objection. Margaret had been bending over backwards to meet Luke's request that they only speak as necessary and be polite when the children were present. They had agreed that they would sit down with the children and tell them that Luke would be leaving soon. Unknown to Luke, Margaret had contacted a counselor to help her regain herself. She had been so desperate and she had no close friends since Evan left. She had, with some misgivings, contacted a counseling service. She felt so lost and alone. Other than for work or anything involving the children, she had been unable to function or think coherently. She had her first session Thursday evening. She had called Luke that morning after they had arrived at work and asked him if she could be late coming home that evening. Luke agreed quickly, and oddly she was hurt that he didn't even ask about the reason for her delay. "Hi Margaret and welcome. I'm Dr. Stevenson." Margaret was a little surprised to find out that her counselor was a man. For some reason, she had thought that she would be seeing a woman. She was to find out that most women felt the same way because of the misconception that a woman would be better able to understand the conflict she was experiencing. "Margaret, I want to start out this evening by explaining what we are here to accomplish. I am not here to explain how you got to where you are today. I am here to help you help yourself. You are the one that is going to help yourself understand where you are today, and then hopefully help yourself decide where you would like to be in the future. What I am going to do is help lead you through this maze we call life." "Doctor, I can barely think and I don't see how I can possibly help myself. I can't get past the last conversation I had with my husband, and that was almost 2 weeks ago." "Margaret, please call me Phil," speaking softly and with compassion. "There is only one way to do this. We have to start at the beginning. So just start talking and we'll take it wherever that leads us." "Okay, thanks Phil. I guess I need to start with Evan. You see, he has been my lover for most of the last 2 years. It seemed that it all started because I had been feeling depressed and lonely. Luke, my husband, and I had been so wrapped up in our jobs and the children, and I guess that we were just going through the motions of being a couple. Then I met Evan and he became my friend. He was attentive and paid me many compliments about my looks. He seemed to really enjoy my company. I began to seek out his companionship rather than spend the effort to be with my husband. He is about 5 years younger than me, and he made me feel younger just by being around him. It just seemed to be the natural next step to become his lover. At first I felt some guilt, but it wasn't long that it felt right and natural. I knew that I was cheating on Luke, but I just put all that to the back of my mind and buried it there. This all went on for over a year. Luke did complain to me several times that he felt we were drifting apart, but I told him that it was all in his mind, and that since we had been married for several years, it was only natural that we slowed down a little. In looking back over the last 2 years, I just can't believe how badly I treated Luke. He tried so hard, and I just shut him out of my life except for our children. That was the only part of our marriage that I allowed him to participate in. I guess after a while, Luke just quit trying. I am sure that the only reason that he stayed was because of the kids. I can't understand so many things about what I did and why. Anyway, I guess that things came to a head when Luke returned from Hawaii. That's when he told me that he knew about Evan and me, and that he had known for quite some time. I hadn't realized that he knew. Before he had returned from Hawaii, I had decided to end my affair with Evan and try to repair the damage I had done to my marriage and my husband. When Luke returned, I tried to be an affectionate and loving wife. I guess that is what pissed him off so badly. I'm trying to look at it from his point of view, and I guess that I can see just how two-faced that would have seemed. But really, I was trying to start making up to Luke for all the evil that I have done to him. He just never even let me get started before he blasted me. So here I am trying to see just what is left of my marriage and my life. The rest of the session was spent with Phil trying to help Margaret discover just exactly why she thought it was okay to cheat on Luke. Friday evening after dinner was when they had decided to tell the children of their impending divorce. Luke took the lead, and in a calm voice and using simple terms, he told the kids that they were not happy living together and had not been happy for some time. Luke explained that it had become too difficult and painful to continue living together as husband and wife, and that he would be seeking a divorce as soon as possible. Margaret really didn't have much to say, so she just sat there while Luke explained to their kids what was happening to their family. Finally, Luke just ran out of steam. There were only so many words that could be said about the end of a marriage and the end of a family. Billy, the oldest, got up and walked over to give his dad a long hug. "I love you, Dad. Can I come live with you when you leave?" Tammy jumped up from the couch and ran over to Billy and Luke. "Daddy, I want to live with you and Billy. I don't want you to leave me here by myself." Hugging and crying, they sat on the sofa while Margaret sat on the chair with a stunned look on her face. They were so involved with each other that they didn't see the look of pain and sorrow come over Margaret. She grasped her chest as though the pain would cause her to have a heart attack. "Doesn't anyone in the family love me?" she wailed. Billy and Tammy looked at their mom with cold expressions. "Mom, we still love you, but we damn sure don't like you, and we don't want to live with you without our dad." Tammy nodded quickly in agreement with her brother. "I'm your mother, for God's sake. Why wouldn't you want to live with me? You haven't been much of a mom for us for a long while. We both know that you haven't been a good wife. You must realize that we know about you and Uncle Evan. The last place we would want to live is with you and your next boyfriend. Kids, don't be mean to your mother. It's late, and we have to get some sleep tonight. Off to bed now, and we'll talk about this on the weekend." Luke gave them both another hug and then gently pushed them off to bed. The children were both crying as they went up to their rooms. Margaret just sat there and stared at Luke. "How could you do that to me?" she hissed. "I can't believe that you would be so mean and cruel to tell the children about Evan. Why would you do that? Do you hate me so much that you would try to punish me through the children? You must realize that you make yourself less a man with that type of ugly behavior." Margaret just shut up. "You don't have any idea, do you? I haven't said a word to the kids. I didn't have to because obviously the only one you tried to hide your nasty behavior from was me. The kids have known almost from the beginning, and they have suffered from the shame for too long. But in answer to your question, I really do hate you that much. I'll never forgive you for what you have done to me, the kids, our family, and everyone else affected by your selfishness." Not wanting to spend another moment in her company, he went off to his bedroom for the remainder of the night, leaving Margaret to suffer by herself. Margaret sat there for the longest time. This, she realized, was her final wake-up call. The fact that her children were aware of her affair almost from the beginning made her feel dirty and terribly used, like she assumed a hooker might feel. Then she realized further that she also felt the same way because of the hurt that she had heaped on her husband. How did I get to be so selfish and uncaring towards my husband and family? She had no answer to that question, and later on, even with the help of her counselor, she was never to get anything that seemed to answer that question fully. "I guess I have been a really bad person for so long that I've come to believe that I'm normal, and that this is how most other people behave. I'm not a stupid person, but I have surely acted very stupidly." In looking back at this moment, Margaret realized that this was the time when it began to finally sink in that she had been a terrible wife to her husband and a barely adequate mother to her children, and all because she had selfishly enjoyed an affair with another man who was not her husband. She had been giving herself to another man with complete disregard to her marriage vows. It was then that she realized that in giving herself to Evan, she had been taking away from Luke, and that at the time she had come to have so little respect for Luke that it hadn't seemed to matter. She had believed that because he loved her so much, that she could do whatever she pleased and he would always be there for her and would always forgive and accept her back again. She mused for a long time about what Luke may have been doing while she was devoting all her time to Evan. She knew that Luke had a good, healthy sex drive, and she was very aware now that she had slept with him no more than a dozen times in over 2 years. Thinking more clearly and carefully than she had in so long a time, she began to wonder if Luke had finally given up and found release and comfort in another woman's arms. Then from the back of her mind, Luke's secretary in Hawaii popped to the very top of a short list that Luke could have been more than friendly with. She remembered hearing quite clearly the tone of voice that Luke used when talking about his girl Friday. In fact, during their infrequent telephone conversations, the only time his voice became animated when he was talking about this bitch, Kelly. Margaret's final thoughts as she finally drug herself off to her lonely bed was how she had become such a selfish person and how she could have ever treated Luke so badly. As she was just about to drift off to sleep, one more thought flashed through her mind, and it totally surprised her. I still love him. Life somehow managed to carry on for Luke and Margaret. They had come to a truce of sorts, and other than sleeping in separate beds, began to act more each passing day like a married couple with children. There was no touching, hugging, or any verbal terms of endearment. The rule of the day was to act towards one another like a distant acquaintance. Luke had talked with Billy and Tammy more than once and had finally convinced them that while Margaret had treated him very badly, she had still been a good and loving mother for them. They saw that their father and mother both needed their love and support. This made it even easier for the family to enjoy a semi-normal day of living together. Luke had hired a lawyer and had filed for divorce. He had no desire to inflict any revenge on Margaret and simply wanted out of the marriage. He was just sick and tired of the whole mess and just want out. Occasionally, he would imagine some of the wonderfully evil things that he could inflict on his wife for her affair. He could tell her parents, his parents, their friends, etc. This way he could let her experience some hurt and shame. He had heard and read stories about husbands that had made elaborate and convoluted plans to exact revenge, but really he was just tired of the whole thing and could not muster up the desire to put that much work into something that he no longer cared about. Over time, their parents and friends realized that their marriage was on the rocks, and although they asked questions and made comments, neither Luke nor Margaret would answer any of questions or discuss what was happening. Luke was ashamed of how Margaret had become such a 304 in his mind. He still believed in the back of his mind that somehow he had been lacking and was at least partially at fault for his wife's actions. Margaret had, through her counselor, began to understand some of the reasons for her behavior and in addition realized more each day how much she had hurt and shamed her husband. Neither of them had a friend that they would have been at ease to share their feelings with about this terrible time in their lives. At least Margaret had her counselor to fall back on and talk to, but Luke really had no one, and by keeping all of his frustrations bottled up, it began to take a serious toll on his mental and physical health. Luke had been fair in the divorce petition, and Margaret had known that fighting the divorce was both stupid and mean, so she had signed her agreement to the proceedings, and they were now simply waiting the necessary 60 days for the action to be complete. Without discussing it with Margaret or the children, he had begun a quiet search for a small apartment and had located one in a nice small building complex fairly close to his work. He had signed the lease and would be moving in shortly before the divorce became final. He knew that the dream of the kids living with him was just a dream and that they would be much better in the long run living with their mother. They had finally begun to behave normally and lovingly towards her again and had not voiced any further desire to live with their dad. Margaret looked at Luke one day and with sudden clarity saw that he was looking like shit. His skin was pale. He looked unkempt and had obviously lost weight. "Look, are you feeling okay?" she asked. "You don't look well at all." Luke looked at her with surprise because they so seldom spoke unnecessarily to each other. Thoughtfully he answered, "You're right. I feel pretty run down and pretty much anything I do seems to take so much more effort than it should. I just can't get through the day without feeling completely exhausted. I think you need to see a doctor and soon. I've never seen you look so ill." Margaret picked up the phone book and began to page through it. "I'm going to call for an appointment now." It didn't even dawn on both Luke and Margaret that this was the act of a caring spouse. Margaret had always taken the lead in things of this nature, so it seemed natural even with the divorce looming over their relationship. "Okay, Luke, you can put your shirt back on," the doctor said the next afternoon. Luke looked at his physician and asked, "Well, doc, what's my problem?" "Luke, you're just flat run down. What I see is that you obviously have not been eating properly, and it looks like you have been having problems sleeping for some time. Tell me what's been going on in your life. You seem to be suffering from severe depression." Luke looked at the doc for a long moment, and then, "I'm getting divorced. My wife has been having an affair for almost 2 years, and I finally came to the realization about 6 months ago while I was working on a long-term assignment in Hawaii for my company. I guess I was finally able to take a look at our relationship because of the time and distance away from her. Oddly enough, and I can't really explain it, but I have been much more upset about her cheating on me since I have returned home. For some reason, while I was in Hawaii, I knew and realized what had happened, but again, it really didn't seem to bother me that much until I returned." As the physician looked at his patient, he realized that he was looking at a man in deep emotional pain. "I'm going to give you a prescription for some mild antidepressant medication, and I'm going to refer you for some counseling. You've got to get a handle on your personal life, or the next time I see you will be after you have been admitted to the hospital. Look, you need help, and where you get it is not nearly as important as when. You really need someone to talk to about this whole mess in your life. You need help now." That evening after the kids and Margaret had all gone to bed, Luke sat there thinking about the doctor's advice. On impulse, he picked up his cell and called the number on his speed dial. The phone rang, and then he heard the voice of the one person that he knew he could talk with about the mess of his life. Kelly? He almost sobbed her name. Can I please come see you? I really need help. Kelly didn't even hesitate. Luke, I'll be waiting. That evening after the kids and Margaret had all gone to bed, Luke sat there thinking about the doctor's advice. On impulse, he picked up his cell and called the number on his speed dial. Kelly came out of the shower to the ringing of her phone. Still damp and wrapped in a large towel, she answered the phone. Hello? Kelly? Choked the male voice on the other end. Look, is that you? What is wrong, darling? You sound absolutely awful. Kelly, I think I'm going to lose my mind. I'm so desperate and I feel sometimes that I'm going to collapse and have a heart attack. I need someone to talk to, and I want to come see you in Seattle for a few days. I need help and I need it before it's too late. When can you get here? She asked. I can be there by tomorrow evening. Tell me what your flight number is and time of arrival, and I'll be there to pick you up at the airport. Luke couldn't help but laugh a little at Kelly because he was so relieved at her answer. She didn't waste time asking dumb-ass questions, but went to the heart of the matter knowing that the only important information was that Luke was welcome to come, and that she would be there to pick him up at the airport. Quickly giving her his flight information, Luke couldn't help but say before hanging up the phone, Kelly, I think you are going to save my mind and maybe even my life. The next morning, Luke called his boss and arranged for the week off. Then before Margaret left for work, he asked to speak with her in the kitchen. The kitchen had become almost their formal meeting ground when they needed to speak with each other. Outside of these meetings, they rarely had more words with each other than absolutely necessary in taking care of business, the house, or the children. I'm leaving later this morning on a trip, and I'll probably be back by Friday or Saturday at the latest. Taken by surprise by the sudden announcement, Margaret looked at Luke with a deep misgiving. I didn't know you had a business trip planned, and I can't help but wonder why you waited until the last moment to tell me. With a sudden suspicion, she looked at him with a glare in her eyes and asked, This isn't a business trip, is it? Are you meeting with someone? I don't understand what is going on here, and I think it's only fair that you tell me if there is someone else. I know you have filed for divorce, but I had hoped that you would at least wait until we are no longer married before you start having relations with other women. Luke sighed deeply and said, You're right about this not being a business trip. When I went to the doctor the other day, he said I was 1 foot out of the hospital. Margaret gasped and clutched her chest as she almost staggered and then sat quickly in the nearest chair. Luke quickly held up his hand and continued, I'm not dead yet, so don't go running to the bank just yet. The one thing the doc stressed was that I needed help and I needed it quickly. It was then that I realized that I needed someone to talk to about all this shit that my life has turned into. I have spent all my time with you, and the children, and then with my job. I don't have any close friends, and I haven't for a long time. It's amazing how I have let myself get to be such a loner. All I know is that I can't talk to you. The only one I can talk to is Kelly. I knew it, Margaret hissed. I just knew there was something about that bitch, and now you are going to her. I just bet that you've got a whole week of sex planned, and you're just running off to leave me here with the kids by myself. Luke and Margaret sat there glaring at each other. They were only a small spark from a major blow-up, and both were more than ready to take this fight to the next level. As someone in the military might have said, the body count is going to be really high when the action is done. Suddenly, without warning, Luke just seemed to deflate and seemed to become smaller than he actually was. With almost a pleading in his voice, he leaned towards his wife and said in a softer tone, Margaret, I'm almost at the end of my rope here. I don't think that you realize how close I am to some kind of really desperate kind of action. I need someone to talk to if I'm going to survive all this hell my life has become, and if Kelly is the only one, then you are just going to have to just suck it up and deal with it. I didn't create this mess. I'm sure that somehow in some way, I must be at least partly to fault, but you were the one that made the decision that it was okay to ruin all of our lives by screwing a man who is not your husband. You are the one that has been living a lie of being my faithful and loving wife for these past 2 years. I am the one who is trying to get some kind of sanity back in my life, and if Kelly is the one to help me, then so be it. The next morning, Margaret watched her husband walk through the security gate at the airport on his way to Seattle and to Kelly. I can't believe just how screwed up my life and my marriage have become. My husband hates me, and right now I hate myself. Wearily, Margaret turned and walked back to the parking lot where she had left her car. Her depression was so deep and overpowering that she would hardly function, but she was able to drive herself home without killing herself or anyone else. Later that day, she sat in the office of her counselor, and while she sat there waiting, she reviewed the last several visits she had attended. When she had first started attending counseling sessions with Dr. Phil Stevenson, Margaret had stated to him that her main goal initially was to discover why she had decided it was okay to have an affair with Evan. Phil had told her that he was there to help her discover these things, and to try to help her also discover what she wanted from the rest of her life. This was going to be her 4th session, and so far the only thing that she was sure about was that she still loved Luke, and she still had absolutely no idea why she had turned her back on her husband and gave herself to Evan. She was becoming very frustrated by the lack of progress. She had really hoped that she could find a way to explain to Luke why she had acted so badly for so long. Her long-term goal was to be able to explain to Luke in such a way that she would convince him to try and save their marriage. So far, one thing was very clear. She had no idea how to explain her affair. There simply was no explanation that made any sense to her, and sure as hell if it didn't make any sense to her, it wouldn't make any sense to Luke either. Phil sat at his desk and looked at Margaret. He noticed immediately that she was very depressed. He had been worried about her for the last 2 sessions and had spent several hours trying to decide on his next step. So far, they had made very little progress, and he knew that she was becoming upset by her lack of improvement in her understanding how this had all happened and how her life seemed to be in the sewer. With a small sigh, he said, "Good afternoon, Margaret. How are you doing today?" "Hi, Phil. I'm not doing so well today. You see, I just put Luke on a plane to Seattle this morning. He is going to see his girlfriend, and I'm just not sure when or even if he is coming back." The look of dejection on her face was so severe that Phil could not help but feel some of her pain and sorrow. "I have to do something to help this poor woman, and I need to be quick about it. I can clearly see that time is something that I can't waste any longer." Clearing his throat, he said sharply, "Margaret, it's time to cut out the bullshit. I'm tired of listening to you whine and whimper about poor little you." The stunned look on her face encouraged him to continue. "I'm here to help you, but, damn, I can't if you are only here to feel sorry for yourself. It's time you quit acting like a little girl, and someone has taken your little dolly away. It's time that you grow up and start acting like an adult woman who is married and has children. So far, all I have seen is a selfish person who is crying because she was caught and now just can't seem to understand why she is being punished." Margaret looked at her counselor with tears in her eyes and a trembling lip. "Why are you being mean to me?" she sobbed. "Everyone is being mean to me. Why can't anyone be nice to me just once?" "I don't know any other way to get this message across to you," Phil said harshly. "Margaret, it's time for you to quit sniffling about poor little you. To put it simply, I'm tired of your bullshit, and I'm tired of you acting like a spoiled, selfish 304. You want to know why everyone is mean to you? It's because you have been selfish and mean to all around you. Look what you have done to your husband, and look what you have done to your children. Do you really think that your actions are those of a loving wife and a good mother? Do you honestly believe that it's okay to screw another man who is not your husband, and to practically carry on your affair in front of your husband and children? Come on, woman, get a grip, please. You're not stupid. Wake up and smell the pile of shit that you are sitting in." Phil was only using a little acting in his tirade at Margaret. Actually, he really felt most of what he was saying to be accurate, so it was easy to sit there breathing a little heavy and glaring at his patient. "It's time for you to get honest with me and yourself. It's time to start answering some questions with the real motives. Simply put, it's time to shit or get off the pot. So what's it going to be, Margaret? I don't have the time or inclination to sit here any longer and listen to your bullshit." Phil knew that his language was very strong, but he needed Margaret to get with the program, or he was going to lose her, and he hated to lose. That was one of the reasons he was so successful. Margaret sat there and looked tearfully at her counselor. Slowly over the next few minutes, he could see the change come over her face. The tears slowly morphed to a glare, and then to determination. "Okay, doctor," Margaret said with some derision. "As you have so clearly stated, it's time for this woman to shit or get off the pot. As my husband used to be so fond of saying, if you look like a shithead, act like a shithead, and sound like a shithead, then you must be a shithead. So, Dr. Shithead, what is the first question?" Margaret looked fiercely back at Phil, daring him to take the next step. Phil, without letting her see, gave himself a little mental high five. It seemed, at least for the moment, that Margaret had finally come to realize that she was the one who had to do most of the work, and it appeared finally that she was ready to take the first step in the right direction. "Okay, Margaret, here is your first question that you must find the answer. Tell me your marriage vows, and tell me which ones you have honored, and which ones you have broken." Margaret easily answered the first part of the question. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness or in health, forsaking all others, to love and to cherish till death do us part." Now, Margaret, think about this carefully and tell me which of those vows you have honored and which have you broken. "That is easy. I have honored all of those vows except for the one about forsaking all others." Margaret wasn't proud of her answer, but she felt that it was the correct one. Wrong, Phil declared forcefully. You have broken all of your marriage vows. Quickly, Margaret interrupted, saying, No, Phil. I only broke the one vow when I had my affair with Evan. Again, wrong, Margaret. Phil paused for a moment and then continued. When you changed the part that read from this day forward to only when I want to, you broke all your marriage vows. So now your vows simply read, to have and to hold, whenever I want to, for better and for worse, whenever I want to, for richer and for poorer, whenever I want to, in sickness and in health, whenever I want to, forsaking all others, but not all the time, to love and to cherish, my husband and my lover, till death do us part, or until the divorce. You see, Margaret, you decided to change your vows to allow you to have the best of both worlds. You have your loving, trusting husband, and you also have your loving and lusty lover. But I don't remember you ever saying to me that you and your husband decided together to change these vows. So tell me, Margaret, did Luke agree with you to change your vows? Did you and your husband ever sit down together and discuss these changes, and together decide that it was okay for you to have an affair with Evan? Tell me about that conversation between you and your husband. Cut the crap, Phil, Margaret retorted heatedly. You damn well know that we didn't have any such conversation. Phil looked at Margaret and said softly, Why not? Because. Margaret stuttered to a stop and then continued. Because Luke would have flipped his lid and walked out on me right then. There was no way that he would have ever considered giving me permission to sleep with Evan. Again, Phil asked softly, Why not? Come on, Phil, this is stupid. I thought we were going to get some answers to important questions. Don't you consider how you decided to sleep with another man who is not your husband an important question? I certainly think that it's very important. Tell me why you would not ask Luke for permission to screw another man. Margaret, this is important and I want an answer. Because asking my husband for permission to sleep with another man was wrong. Margaret blurted out. Yes, Margaret, Phil said gently. Because to ask that question was wrong, and to sleep with Evan was wrong. You see, it is a common mistake that many couples fail to understand completely. If it is something that you would not do in the presence of your mate, then it is something that you definitely should not do, any other time as well. Now here is another question for you, and I want you to consider your answer more carefully than on the last question. When did you lose your respect for Luke? I never ever lost my respect for Luke. He is the most caring and loving person I know. He is also the most honorable person that I have ever met. So when did you lose your respect for him? Was it before or after you slept with your lover? Or was it just a gradual thing that occurred as your affair progressed? Why do you say I lost respect for Luke? I don't understand because I have never lost respect for him. Okay, Margaret, let's try something else here. Listen to me carefully. You have discovered that your husband has been having an affair with another woman. He has been going behind your back and hiding his affair from you for some time. He has been screwing this other woman, and because of his affair, he has been drawing away from you and giving you less and less of the love that you should be getting from him. He is becoming more distant and colder to you as each day passes. He and his lover are talking about you behind your back. He is feeling excitement because he is pulling one over on you. He has been doing it for so long now that he no longer even feels any guilt for breaking his marriage vows. What do you think about that? The pain on Margaret's face was very evident. It hurts, Phil. It hurts so much. Margaret could not continue. So tell me, Margaret, Phil asked. Tell me if he still respects you? The stricken look on her face told him that she had realized the answer to his question. Then Margaret broke and leaning forward, she sobbed brokenly into her hands. When Margaret finally regained control, Phil continued. So Margaret, you broke your vows and you lost respect for your husband. Because consciously or unconsciously you felt that Luke was aware of your affair and did nothing to stop you, and because he did nothing then you began to see him as less of a man and you lost your respect for him. You didn't consider that he didn't know about you and Evan. You hid your affair, but you still felt that he should have known. Does that about sum it up? So, please tell me about the relationship between you and Luke while your affair was going on, and especially towards the end when Luke left for Hawaii. Please think about it for a moment, and then in your own words, try to describe how you felt about Luke and how you believe he felt about you. Margaret actually sat quietly for about 10 minutes before beginning. I'm not really sure about our relationship, particularly at the beginning of the affair. I believe that before and again at the beginning of my affair that Luke and I had a really good relationship. We often talked about almost anything under the sun. Our sex life was good and frequent. I mean at least 3 or 4 times a week, and that wasn't easy since the kids were always around. Luke was a kind and considerate lover, and I can remember, even today, just how good I would feel as we cuddled after making love. It's just that I sometimes wanted more, and until I slept with Evan, I didn't know what that something more was. I always enjoyed making love with Luke, but to be honest, It was getting to be a little routine and maybe even stale. I can remember Luke and I had talked about our lovemaking. Margaret paused for a moment, and then her face turned from contemplative to stricken with grief. Oh my God. I can remember Luke saying the same thing to me one day before my affair started. He was saying that we had been drifting apart a little, and he felt that we needed to do some things to spice up our lovemaking. I had completely forgotten about that. Phil, I can't believe that I had forgotten all about that conversation with my husband. I never once thought of doing any of those things with Luke, but those same things were what I did willingly and with great enjoyment with Evan. What was I thinking? Phil looked at her for a moment and said, "We may never know the answer to that one. Evan, I would basically do anything with him that he wanted. He really brought out the adventure of trying new things in bed. Maybe it was because Luke would ask, and Evan would just take what he wanted. Of course, I enjoyed sex with both Luke and Evan, but in looking back, I can see that with Luke after sex, I would want to cuddle and have him hold me. I could really feel the closeness then more than any other time. With Evan, the sex was really good, but when we were done, I just wanted to get right up and take a shower and really wanted nothing more from him until the next time I wanted him for sex. Then as time went by, I found that I wanted sex with Luke less and less. I can't really tell you why, but we became more like roommates with children instead of husband and wife. There at the last before Luke went to Hawaii, I can't remember making love with him, and I can't remember even sitting down together to just enjoy some time together. I'm pretty sure that I was doing a great job of ignoring my husband unless I needed him to do something for me. I do know that it wasn't long after Luke left that I started to really miss him, and it got worse with almost every passing day. I can remember trying to tell him that when we spoke on the phone, but he was so cold and I could tell that he just wanted to know about the kids so he could say goodbye and get off the phone. I even asked him if I could come see him for a long weekend, and he said no because he was simply too busy to spend any time with me. It wasn't until after he came home that I realized that he was too busy for me because he was spending all his spare time with Kelly, his girl Friday. Those last words were said angrily. Margaret could only feel the pain and the hurt of Luke's affair, and her heart seemed to swell with her anguish. Phil, it hurts me so much to know about Luke and Kelly. Again, his voice so soft as it could be barely heard. Margaret, I think you are finally feeling a little of the pain that Luke has been feeling for so long. Phil, if my pain hurts me this much, then I can't even begin to imagine the depth of Luke's pain. Can I? Margaret, until you can begin to understand what you have done, you will never begin to understand his pain. So here are a few things I want you to think about until our next session. Why do you want Luke back? And what do you think that you have to do to get him to even try to save the marriage? Margaret, until you can begin to understand what you have done, you will never begin to understand his pain. So here are a few things I want you to think about until our next session. Why do you want Luke back? And what do you think that you have to do to get him to even try to save the marriage? Luke saw Kelly as soon as he cleared the security checkpoint at the airport. She looked absolutely fabulous. She saw him at the same moment, and her first thought was how haggard he looked. She could tell immediately that he was really on the jagged edge with one foot already over the precipice. She waved and ran into his arms. They stood there hugging tightly in the middle of the flow of passengers making their way out of the airport. Kelly, you look wonderful. I am so happy to see you. When I first saw you a moment ago, I realized how long it has been since I've seen a friendly and welcoming face. Come on, look, let's get your bags and get out of this madhouse. I'm parked out front, and if they haven't towed me yet, we can make a quick exit. They grabbed his bag from the carousel and quickly left the airport in Kelly's Camry. Kelly kept glancing at Luke as she drove, and again, she couldn't help seeing how haggard he had become in just a short month. Luke looked over at her, and then she could now also see the pain and despair in his eyes. Her heart broke at what she was seeing. She so desperately wanted to help him any way that she could. Luke was very withdrawn, and Kelly didn't try to force conversation on him as they drove to her apartment. When they arrived, she led him up to the second floor and ushered him into her home. She showed him where to put his bags in the spare bedroom and told him to meet her in the kitchen for some coffee. Holding his cup cradled in his hands, Luke said, "Thanks, Kelly. I just didn't know where to turn to and what to do. I've been so lost, and the pain in my heart is simply more than I can bear. This last month with my wife has been an absolute hell. What is she doing to you? Do you want me to come back there and kick her butt for you?" Kelly gave a small wry grin and continued to ask, "Have you filed for divorce? Are you still living at home? Is she still sleeping with her a-hole lover? Come on, Luke. Tell me why you are in such bad shape. I guess I should just start from when I returned home." On looking back, I really hadn't done any real thinking about my marriage or my wife the whole time I was in Hawaii. Part of that is because I was with you most of the time, and I guess the rest I could simply blame on ignoring the whole mess. From the moment I got off the plane, Margaret was all over me. I mean, she was acting the adoring and faithful wife welcoming her long-gone and sorely missed husband. By the time we got home from the airport, I couldn't take it another second and simply blew up. I told her I knew all about her affair, how long it had been going on, and how I felt about how she had treated me during the entire time. I guess I really blasted her. She actually had the balls to look hurt. I would have laughed at that if I hadn't been so hurt and angry. Over the next week, she kept after me. She tried to keep up her fake loving facade and just acted as thought I was simply having a rough time getting back into the family routine. Finally, I was able to get through to her that I was going to divorce her as soon as legally possible and made her understand that I wanted absolutely nothing to do with her and nothing from her from that moment on. I figured that pretty much how it was going to happen when you got back home, Kelly said softly. I knew that you really had not faced up to just what you were going back to, and I was afraid that it was going to be too much for you to handle. You still haven't answered my questions. Luke laughed harshly and said, I can't get anything past you, Kelly. You always get to the meat of the subject and won't let go until you get what you want. Yes, I filed for divorce, but it's being held up because Margaret hasn't hired her own lawyer yet, and I simply refuse to pay for both attorneys. I'm getting pretty frustrated and have thought several times of simply walking away. I really don't care if I'm divorced from her or not as long as I don't have to live with her or support her. My lawyer says that I can actually do that as long as I make sure that I give her an allowance equal to what the courts would normally require. I got a great bonus and a good raise when I got back to the home office, so I can actually afford to take reasonably good care of my kids. Margaret would have to keep her job to make up the difference. Her lover is gone. I don't know when he left or how long he has been gone. I really don't care because it's no longer important. I can't really explain why, but I'm still living at home and sleeping in our spare room. The kids and I are doing really well, although I'm a little surprised about that. It's just that every time I look at the mean, evil bitch I laughingly refer to as my wife, I get this terrible pain in my heart and a huge ache in my gut. Words cannot describe the hate and loathing I have for the way that she has destroyed our marriage and our family. Luke looked at Kelly and continued, When I think about not only what she did but how long it went on behind my back, I get in an actual rage. I lose any ability to think and can only feel. I keep asking myself simple questions like, why? Was I that bad of a husband and lover? Did I do something so bad that I drove her into the arms of her lover? Was he so much more of a man than me that she couldn't help but chose him over me? If I hadn't had that time with you in Hawaii, I would most likely have lost my mind. My doubts and questions would have overwhelmed me completely. Kelly laughed lightly. I can assure you that you are every bit of a real man, both in and out of bed. If there hadn't been so many differences between us, I think we might have been able to become a real couple. You certainly were able to ring my bell many, many times. I can only guess why your wife did what she did. There are simply too many reasons or excuses that prompted her to be unfaithful. She is the only one that can answer your questions. One day, maybe, you will have the strength to ask her. Pausing momentarily, Kelly continued, The questions that you really need answered to are really quite simple. Do you still love your wife? Do you think there is any chance that you two could get past this terrible tragedy? Do you even want to try to forgive her? It's questions like these that are really the important issues that you must think about and try to discuss with your wife. You must also make sure that whatever you do decide to do, you must do that for the right reasons. Luke and Kelly talked long into the night. Kelly had taken some personal time, so she didn't have to go into work the rest of the week. Early in the morning, Kelly suddenly yawned and told Luke she had to get some rest. He was also exhausted. She gently pushed him towards the spare room, and then she retired to her bedroom for some sleep. They both awoke about noon, and after showering and dressing, Kelly made a healthy and hearty lunch. Afterwards, Kelly took Luke to a local park so that they could enjoy the wonderful weather and each other's company. The rest of the week was spent talking long hours, taking walks through the park, and enjoying relaxing companionship. The last day before Luke had to return home was spent leisurely relaxing about Kelly's apartment. They did talk briefly about their relationship as well as many other topics. I am a little surprised that we did not sleep together while I was here, Luke mentioned casually that afternoon. I mean that we did have an affair in Hawaii that lasted several months, yet here in Seattle, in your apartment, we have been as brother and sister. I wonder why that is. I still think that you are an extremely attractive young woman. It's just that, Luke, we had our time in Hawaii, and I believe that was really all we were meant to have with each other. Actually, I also feel much more like your younger sister now. You don't need me complicating your life right now. Your plate is so full of other things, and there is no room for us. It's not a bad thing. It's just the way things are now. The next morning as they drove towards the airport, Luke thanked Kelly for helping him so much in such a short time. I guess now I know what I need to do to start on the rest of my life. Kelly looked at Luke with a question on her face. I need to sit down with Margaret and ask some of those questions that we have talked about. After that, I need to decide to go on with the divorce or not. If divorce is the answer, then I need to find a place and move out of our home. Staying there like things are now is just so bad for everyone. If by some miracle, divorce is not the immediate answer, then No, Margaret and I need to get some help. We could never do this by ourselves. Kelly smiled at Luke and knew that he was going to be okay now, and she felt as though a huge weight had been lifted off her back. She did love Luke as a brother and only wanted for him to be happy. Later, she watched him go through airport security and waved to him one last time as he looked back at her before turning the corner. Dr. Phil sat quietly at his desk and looked at Margaret sitting before him. She seemed somehow a little different, but he couldn't tell for sure. She sat there for several minutes with her head down and looking seemingly at her hands in her lap until finally she was the one to break the heavy silence. Phil, I'm sitting here wondering how in all that is holy, how I ever got to this place. I guess what I am attempting to say is, how did I get to be so screwed up? I've spent every last available minute just thinking about the last year and a half. If I took a knife and stabbed my husband in the heart, I am sure that I could not have done him any more harm. Also, if I had simply drowned my children, I could not have been any more heartless and uncaring about their welfare. It seems that I have been the only one who has not been able to the horrible and selfish way I have been acting for way too long. So I really cannot tell you or my husband just why I had an affair. I really don't know. Can you help me? Margaret, I can't help you with that one. The answer, if you even ever get an answer, must come from you. Not me, not Luke, not your children, and even not Evan can ever find out why you felt it was okay to be so destructive to those that you should have been so protective. You may never figure out why. What you do have to do is figure out some way to try to repair all this damage. Well, you see, that is the other question that I simply have no answer. I don't have any idea of even the first step to try to fix this ghastly marriage that I have created. The only fact that I've been able to salvage is that if Luke had done this to me, I would have never forgiven him, and in fact I would have done my absolute best to destroy him. How can he forgive me? I can't even begin to forgive myself. At this moment, if he asks me for a divorce, I would give it to him without any fight. I just couldn't bring myself to give him any more grief. With those final words, she brought her arms up, hugging herself, and as tears started flowing, she broke into deep, gut-wrenching sobs. You have finally taken the first step to recovery, Margaret. That's the first time I have heard you honestly admit that you are the one completely at fault. Just now, you are recognizing that you have no one else to blame on where you find yourself today. However, you need to somehow find the words to tell Luke. He has been waiting a long time to hear those words from you. Trust me on this. Telling me was easy. Telling him may be the most difficult thing you have ever tried to do. The real difficulty is going to be convincing him that you are sincere about your remorse. Luke woke as the plane tires touched down at the airport. He was a little groggy, but still was surprised that he had slept the entire flight. He also felt better? Do I really feel better? I can't remember the last time I felt this relaxed. I still know that my life is trashed, but for some reason, I don't feel so out of control. He hadn't called Margaret to let her know his flight arrival time. As he rode toward home in the cab, he simply enjoyed looking out at the passing scenery. As he got closer to his house, he realized why he felt as he did. He had reached a decision about his marriage, his life, and the children. He couldn't help but smile to himself. Margaret was in the kitchen when she heard the front door open and close. She rushed into the entryway, and when she saw it was her husband, she staggered to a stop and collapsed to the floor sobbing. Blubbering through her tears and trying to speak through her sobs, she said over and over, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Luke was astonished by Margaret's actions. At first, he did not have a clue, but after only a few moments, he approached his wife and, kneeling beside her, he took her in his arms. In a soothing voice, he tried to calm her. It will all work out somehow. As he held her in his arms and rocked her, slowing back and forth, Margaret began to recover her composure. Finally, Luke released her, and they both rose to their feet. With tears still streaking her face, Margaret said, "I'm so sorry. I just saw you in the doorway and I couldn't help myself. I just lost it. I could only think about how sorry I am for all I have done to you and our children. I know that you will never be able to forgive me or forget all that I have done. I know that I'll never be able to forgive myself. It's not enough, but all I can say is that I'm sorry from the deepest depths of my heart." Margaret then spun and ran to her bedroom, where she closed and locked the door. Luke walked slowly up to her door, and he could clearly hear her sobs. Shaking his head, he walked back and picked up his bag and went to his bedroom to unpack. Margaret spent a restless night, tossing and turning while thinking of the mess she has made of her marriage and her life. If Luke had been listening, he would have heard her sobbing periodically throughout the night. However, Luke wasn't listening. He was enjoying the first night of solid and dreamless sleep in over a month. He woke that morning, and since he was the first one up, he started the coffee. When Margaret joined him in the kitchen, she first noted that her husband was softly humming one of his favorite tunes, and also his posture indicated that he was very relaxed. Luke brought Margaret a cup of coffee, and she sat there at the table while he made them some toast. Something was going on here that she couldn't get a handle on. What? Suddenly she realized that Luke was content, and she knew then that he had made a decision about her and their marriage. Luke? He turned and smiled at Margaret. How your toast? My toast is fine. How was your trip to Seattle? The trip was good. Very good. It was just what I needed to help me come to grips with all this crap that I've been dealing with for the last month. And you don't think that I've been dealing with the same crap? Margaret snapped. Hey, I'm not trying to start a fight here. I was just answering your question. This is the first time in a long time you actually seemed interested in what I have to say. I admit that I was a little surprised, but I thought I would give you the benefit of the doubt and give you an honest answer for a change. An honest answer? I don't get it. What do you mean by that? Margaret, I couldn't even come close to telling you the last time. I felt like you even paid any attention to anything that I have had to say. You have been treating me like a live-in ATM and babysitter for a long, long time. I could have said absolutely anything to you, and I'm sure that you would have said something like, "That's nice, dear." Well, I'm listening now, and I really want to know how your trip was. As I was saying, it was a good trip. I found out that all I really needed was someone to just listen to me and not judge one way or the other. Kelly is a really good friend, and she welcomed me into her home without any questions or stupid useless chatter. She was simply there for me, and I owe her so much. I'll bet you owe her. Margaret sneered and continued. What's her going charge for sex? Margaret was surprised when he didn't rise to her accusation. Luke simply chuckled. I really don't give a damn if you believe me or not. I did not have sex with her this week. Luke continued to grin. I have to confess that was definitely not the case in Hawaii. What? Margaret said with a strangled choke. Are you telling me that you and that bitch had an affair behind my back while you were gone? After looking at her for several moments, he said yes. And what do you really care as if you have anything to say about it? Come on, dear wife. Could you possibly think that I don't have a right to a little sex on the side? I mean, hell, even before I left you certainly went out of your way to keep me away from you. In looking back though, I probably should thank you for that. We can never be sure just what you might have brought to our bed as a surprise. Just what the hell do you mean by that remark? Do you really believe that your boy toy only slept with you? Margaret, I didn't know that you were that stupid. I didn't know you were screwing him at the time, but I sure as hell knew that he was picking up strange sex from time to time. I am reasonably sure that you didn't use a rubber with him, and the few times we screwed you didn't have me use a rubber either. When was the last time you went to the doctor and had yourself tested for STDs? Margaret glared at him and said, Evan never cheated on me. I would have known. Also, I'm sure that he was clean. I've never shown any symptoms, and I sure as hell don't need to get any tests. How the hell do you know that you didn't get anything from your Hawaii bimbo? Luke laughed. She lived with me most of the time I was there, and if you would look at my charges on our credit card, you'll see that I went to the doctor shortly after I returned home. I got the results a few weeks ago and I'm clean. I don't see how you would think Evan was faithful to you. I mean, shit. He screwed you and you're married. If he would cheat with you, I see absolutely no reason why he would not cheat on you. And he did because I saw him with other women, and I know that he slept with them while he was cheating with you. Suddenly, Margaret gave Luke a rueful, small smile. I guess I can't be the smartest person in the room when I look how I've screwed up our marriage. You are right. I need to get into the doctor and make sure that I haven't gotten even more screwed by catching some incurable social disease. Though with a swift, frightened look, I never even considered anything like this. I could have even caught AIDS and given it to you. I could have murdered you. Then Margaret put her face in her hands and cried softly for several minutes. When Margaret finally raised her face, Luke was gone. He had decided that he needed a good walk to give himself time for thought. She didn't know where he went, and she searched the entire house, including the garage where both their cars were parked. She decided to do some of her weekend chores while waiting for him to return. It hadn't escaped her attention that they had actually had a discussion that wasn't about the kids or bills. They had really talked, and both of them had really listened to the other. She also was honest with herself to admit that she had really missed talking with her husband. They had enjoyed some wonderful, wild, and crazy conversations about anything and everything over the years. Later that morning, Margaret was sitting on the couch when Luke returned from his walk. He came into the house and was greeted by the sight of his wife sitting and obviously waiting on him. Taking the hint, He lounged carelessly over his favorite chair and waited for her to speak. Luke, I know that you won't believe me, but I want to make sure that you know that despite my horrible behavior, I really do love you. I am sorry for what I have done to you and our children. That being said, I can tell by your behavior this morning that you have made some kind of decision about us. I'd like to know where I stand. Should I pack my bags or what? Luke just sat there looking at her for almost 5 minutes. At the end of that time, she was trying to hide her anxiety and also not cry again. Somberly, he said, You're right, Margaret. I have made a decision about our marriage, our children and us. Before I tell you what my final decision will be, I believe that we need to talk. Although I have made a decision, it is not locked in stone, and depending on some of the answers that you give me, my decision can be changed. Okay, Luke, I know that you are aware that I've been in counseling for the past several weeks. I haven't figured out all the answers, but there are some things that I have discovered about myself. Since you are the one who wants to discuss our relationship, I'll just let you take the lead. Thanks, Margaret. I know exactly where to start this conversation. This question has been on my mind for several months. I have tried to find an answer, but even now I don't have a clue. Luke looked at Margaret and then taking a deep breath continued. Why? Confused by the single word, Margaret asked, What do you mean why? Then like a revelation, she suddenly understood. You couldn't have started out with an easier question? She laughed ruefully. Actually, if you want to know, my counselor and I spent hours on this exact question. There are many excuses why I had my affair. I had lost weight and was feeling good about myself. Evan was really pouring on the compliments and charm. You and I were not as close at that time as we had been. But these and others are only excuses and not the reason. There was no way that I could compete with that a-hole. Luke said heatedly. How could I even come close? All he had on his plate was that stupid job of his and getting in your pants. I had my job, our children, a wife, bills, house and yard chores, and all the other little things that would supposedly let you know that I was your loving and faithful husband. Yes, I know and I understand now that Evan had been very single-minded in his goals concerning me. He had never cared for a single moment about you or our marriage. He would never have been successful if I had simply shut him down. However, I liked his attention and he could see that I did. When I began to respond to him, he poured it on and the more I got, the more I wanted. After a while, it was all I wanted. Getting back to your question, the reason that I was unfaithful was very simple. After all the excuses and other crap, it boiled down to one phrase. I slept with Evan because I wanted to, and I continued the affair because I could. This is the one thing that Phil, my counselor, and I finally figured out. I knew that you loved me without any reservations. You had always tried to give me anything and everything I wanted. Over time, I came to believe that if it was what I wanted, then it was okay. In retrospect, I had become a completely selfish person. My wants and desires took precedence over you and our children. My husband and family became secondary to my needs and me. I'll admit that initially there was some guilt, but it wasn't long before I never gave my actions a second thought. With a little fear on her face and a slight tremble in her voice, she continued, I know that what I just said is probably very harsh. I could probably have tried to sugarcoat it some, or maybe give it a slant to try to make myself appear to be less selfish. I know that my words continue to hurt you. I simply cannot lie to you anymore. You can continue to ask me questions, and I'm going to do my absolute best to give you as honest an answer as I am capable of doing. She could see several emotions quickly cross his face. There was anger and hurt, but the most prominent feeling was sadness. She couldn't repress the pain that she felt because of her insensitive behavior over the last 2 years. If anyone had asked her at that exact moment if she thought she was a good person, her answer would have been a resounding no. Although I must admit your answer was very honest, it also ripped a humongous hole in my heart. I can't help but be surprised that even after all this time, and all that has happened, that I can still feel so much pain. Do you still love me? And what do you want to do about this awful and very screwed up marriage? This is much easier to answer than your first question. It is very simple and I can answer the first part with a straightforward yes. I do love you. I know that for a long time, I did not show you my love, and maybe even for a while, I did not love you when my affair was at its peak. When you left to go to Hawaii, I did not really care. It's funny, but the longer you were gone, the more I came to miss you, and the more I wanted your love and companionship. When you were here with me, I didn't have any reason to miss you. You were always there if I decided to become your loving, faithful wife again. Your absence and the more distant you became to me made me want you again. I can't explain it, but maybe it is true that absence really does make the heart grow fonder. I know in my case, it is true. There towards the end, my relationship with Evan became to be more irritating than anything else. When I no longer had you and I only had him, It didn't take a long time to realize that with Evan I had no relationship other than the sex. There was absolutely nothing else there. I must admit that I was extremely naive to expect that after your return, we would be able to make any kind of return to our marriage prior to my affair. In the back of my mind, I know that I was aware of Kelly, but I hoped that if I ignored your affair I could get you back. I desperately wanted my marriage with you back, and I was willing to overlook a lot of things to reach that goal. That's mighty gracious of you, Luke said with no small amount of sarcasm. You will overlook a few months for me, and all I have to do is overlook a few years. Of course, I also have to overlook all the crap, deception, and lies you fed me as well. In fact, there are so many things you want me to overlook that maybe I should make a list to ensure that I don't miss any. The shocked look on Margaret's face brought him up short. He immediately reminded himself that this was not supposed to be an opportunity to take cheap shots at his wife. I'm sorry, Margaret. Even though that is exactly how I feel, this is neither the time nor the place for that type of confrontation. I will try to keep things under control so that we can finally have a real conversation on just what we each want from this whole mess. Thanks, Luke. I'm well aware of how you feel, and even though your comments are true, they still hurt. So, what is next? Do you honestly feel any regrets because Evan is gone, and you apparently have not been getting any sex for some time now? Do you think that maybe you should have kept him around until at least we decided if we were going to split or not? Finally, why did you even bother to stay married to me when, during your affair, you obviously preferred his company to mine and you absolutely preferred sex with him rather than with me? You probably think that I'm lying, but I'm telling you the truth when I say that the only regret I have is that I ever was unfaithful to you. I have made many mistakes in my life, but sleeping with Evan was worse than all of the others put together. This may hurt, but you deserve the truth. I honestly did consider leaving you for Evan several times, but when push came to shove, I just couldn't take that final step. I'm sure subconsciously that I knew I was not in love with him. I may have been falling out of love with you, but I never got to the point of falling in love with him. In looking back over the years we have been married, I now realize that if sex were my final criteria for choosing my mate, then my choice would have to be you. Luke couldn't help it. He laughed. He roared. Finally, he was able to choke out. That's the biggest pile of bullshit I have ever heard in my entire life. How can you say that with a straight face? Margaret, that is one of the funniest things I have ever heard you say. I may still be laughing about that into next week. It's not funny and I goddamn sure am not laughing. Margaret couldn't keep the anger out of her voice. I told you that I was not going to lie. We had years of a wonderful marriage with countless times of making love. I had less than 2 years with Evan, and I couldn't even tell you if we ever made love. We screwed a lot, but that will never be able to compare with the loving sex that you and I had for so long. That is my biggest regret, that I gave up so much love for so little. I don't even know what I got from him, but it sure wasn't what you and I once had. I will do anything, and I mean anything to get that back. Luke, don't you even realize the difference? What Evan and I got from each other we took, and what you and I got from each other we gave honestly and freely with love. Can't you see that is why I have been trying so hard to get you to understand I don't want to lose you? I want to be yours for the rest of our lives. Well, Margaret, we could sit here for the next several days, and I could continue to ask you more questions. Somehow I am just too tired, and I really don't want to continue this any longer. Do you have anything for me? The surprised look on her face puzzled him, and then she said, Don't you want to know about me and Evan? I mean that I've been so sure that you would want to know when, where, and how, and everything else about my affair. Luke looked down at his hands for a moment, and then looking her directly in the eye. At first I wanted to know everything. I just had to know what was so great about him that made it worth your while to throw away our marriage and family. I wanted to know about the relationship. Do you love him? Is he bigger than me? Was the sex so much better with him? What different positions did you share with him? How many things did you do for him that you refused to do for me? Pausing again, he took another deep breath. But now, it doesn't matter anymore. The only thing that is important to me is the way you treated me while you were screwing him. The lack of love, lack of respect, and the general apathy that you displayed towards me has hurt me and led me to despair so deep that it scares me. More than once I have even considered taking myself out. I almost justified that by saying that at least I was worth more to you dead than alive. Oh my God. I never meant to hurt you so badly. Look, I was not trying to hurt you. My only excuse is that I was so deeply mired in my own selfishness that I refused to even entertain any thoughts about how this might have been affecting you. If you had hurt yourself or taken your own life, the guilt would have totally destroyed me. It might have even driven me to take my own life. Margaret, that is enough about that. I believe we are both well beyond doing anything as foolish as that. We must always remember that the children still need both of us. Now getting back on track, I don't believe that you completely understand just what kind of woman you have been for the last few years. You don't begin to come close to understanding my pain and anger. I loved you with my heart and soul. I trusted you with my life. I would have given my life to keep you safe. Despite all the obvious signs that you gave out, I just could not accept that you were giving your body and your love to another man. My love for you was so strong that I was able to deny your affair for almost 2 years. 2 years of being your doormat and so cowardly accepting even the little affection that you were willing to give me. There towards the end, you didn't even bother giving me my quarterly mercy sex. My trust in you is completely destroyed. If you said that the sun was rising in the east, then I would immediately look to the west to see if you were lying. I hope that your counselor has helped you with some of your issues. I believe that you do need to understand how you became such a mean, evil bitch. That is probably the only way that you will ever be able to have a relationship with another man. If you don't reach that knowledge, then you will most likely become a cheater again in the future. As of this moment, the only trust one could have in you would be in dealing with the welfare of our children. In any other area, there would always be a level of reserve that I would have about anything you may say or do. I guess that I deserve that, but I resent you referring to me as a mean, evil bitch. I wish that you would try to control your caustic comments for now. I am your wife, and I will not let you talk to me like that. I was not trying to be sarcastic when I called you that. I was simply trying to describe how I view you as a person. Margaret was suddenly heatedly angry. Goddamn you son of a bitch. You think you are such a high and mighty person. Your morals as a man and a husband are totally screwed up. You go and have your affair with that 304 and come back to me and try to put all the blame for this mess on me. If you had been a better husband and a more loving man, I would never have given Evan a second glance. The reason I went to him is because of you. I felt that you were taking me for granted, and I needed more than you were giving me. You need to stop being such an a-hole and start acting like a man. With an icy calm, Luke said, I was wondering when you were going to start blaming me because you were a hooker. Don't think for a second that I believe one word about this being my fault. I don't ever remember saying to you that it would be okay if you screwed another man. I don't remember any conversation where we discussed your belief that I was less of a man and a poor husband. It was your decision to become a hooker, and I was never included in the making of that decision. If you thought that my actions gave you permission to become a hooker, then why did you try so hard for so long to hide your affair? Margaret started to sputter, and Luke knew that this meeting was getting out of control. He knew that he was becoming very angry, and was afraid if he continued that he would say things that could not be taken back. I think we should stop now. I don't want to get into a shouting match where neither of us would win. It's getting late, and I need to get some rest. I have been off of work for a week, and I am going to be working late every day this week to catch up. I propose that we put all of this aside until we have time next weekend to sit down and finish this. Huffing and very red-faced, she said, You are right. I am so angry with you at this moment that I can't stand to be in the same room with you. I believe that I also will need this week to get myself back under control so that I can talk to you with some reason. Luke could tell that she was struggling to keep some control of her feelings. You know, that is a really good idea. It is taking all my willpower to keep from strangling you on the spot. I'm going to pack a small bag and I will stay in one of my company's business suites until Friday. You have my cell number so you can call me if you need anything. Luke turned and left the room. About 15 minutes later, Margaret heard the front door open and close. She couldn't help but be hurt because he had left without another word. I wonder how much my behavior has been responsible for making him so uncaring. Suddenly very tired, she checked on the children and went up to her bedroom. She couldn't wait to get into bed and was grateful when she went asleep so quickly that she didn't remember laying her head on the pillow. Luke put the last folder on the project he was reviewing down on his desk. There was nothing more he could do with it until he gathered more information next week. He was very tired because he had just completed an 80-hour week. Sitting there for a few moments, he gathered his thoughts and picked up the phone. He dialed his home number, and after a few rings, his wife answered. Margaret, it's Luke. I'm just calling to let you know this week at work has been exhausting. I just don't have it in me to come over tonight. If it's okay with you, I plan to come over tomorrow morning about 10 or 11. Same here, Luke. I am too tired to deal with our issues tonight. I have some errands to run in the morning, so why don't you come over about 11:30? I fix us a light lunch and we can talk. Great, and thanks. I see you in the morning. Neither said goodbye or any term of endearment such as I love you. Oddly, they both realized that they missed those things from each other. At exactly 11:30, Luke opened the kitchen door and greeted Margaret. Good morning. How are you doing today? I'm doing as well as can be expected under the circumstances. I'm glad you are on time. I have made one of our favorites for lunch today, and it's ready to eat. I can see that, and you are right. This is one of my favorite weekend lunch meals. Margaret had made a very appealing and delicious lunch plate. There were 2 mounds of tuna and chicken salad and a third mound of cottage cheese. The entree was ringed with a variety of fresh fruit which included pineapple, banana, orange slices, and slices of avocado. It was a meal that they both always enjoyed. By unspoken agreement, they only spoke of mundane, everyday events during the meal, and surprisingly, it was one of the most enjoyable times they had shared in a very long time. After lunch, they both had coffee, which they took out to the back deck. It was a gorgeous day and perfect for sitting outside. Once they were comfortably seated, Margaret said, "I want to apologize about my comments to you last week. I was angry and hurt and could not keep from lashing out at you. My comment about this whole mess being your fault was uncalled for and untrue. I'm sorry." "Thanks, Margaret. We both said some ugly things to each other, but I realized that our talk had gotten out of control. I am grateful that we both were smart enough to back off and take a time out. At least it gave us time to cool off and maybe do some more thinking about our marriage. I think that we are at a point now where we can both answer the final and yet most important questions." Luke paused for effect, and where do we go now? Do we somehow try to save our marriage? Do we give it up as unsalvageable and go our separate ways? In many ways, I have made many decisions already. However, as I said last week, those decisions are not locked in stone. I hate to be melodramatic, but our entire relationship, our marriage and children's welfare depend greatly on the next few minutes. Margaret, I truly hope that you have spent a great deal of time thinking about the questions I just raised. I know that those questions have consumed the vast majority of my time. I have pondered and wrestled and even grieved about all the different ways to respond to those questions. What I need from you more than anything else is your best and most honest answer." Margaret grinned wryly and, "You sure don't make it easy on a person. I do have a lot to say, and I hope that you will let me do it without any interruptions." Luke nodded his acceptance. "Those questions you just posed can be answered either separately or better yet as a single question. I'm going to try to respond to the single one. Luke, as hard as it is to believe, I do still love you. I want to stay married to you and grow old with you. I don't know if you will be able to forgive me for all my unfaithfulness to you and our union. I hope that you will someday be able to forgive. However, I know that you will never forget. The sex was horrible enough. The worst of my behavior was the disrespect to you and the destruction of your trust. From my standpoint, I am willing to do anything and everything to save us. All of my suffering will never compare to what I have inflicted on you. I can only say that I am sorry and then promise to spend the rest of our lives making it up to you as best as I can." Momentarily, Luke seemed to be puzzled. "You surprise me. You seem so positive about your love for me, as well as your apparent willingness to save our marriage. I am glad that you didn't try to use the children as a reason to stay together. That would have one reason that I would reject immediately. Our children are old enough and have displayed a surprising understanding of what has been happening for the last few years. Honestly, I think that they are turning out to be good young adults despite our best efforts. I can't help but doubt your love for me. Please understand that in this case, I can only go by your actions as I feel your words are at best untrustworthy. I do accept your apology for your behavior. By your words and actions, I can see that you are sincere. I also must apologize to you for some of my behavior as well. Had I been just a little less trusting and maybe just more of a man, I would have challenged you long ago about your affair. I chose to blindly ignore your behavior, and it wasn't until I had been gone for a few months that Kelly was able to make me pull my head out of the sand and see. Maybe if I had done those things, we might stand a better chance of staying together. I don't feel much guilt about my relationship with Kelly. I didn't try to hide it, but I also didn't try to bring it out into the open. To be honest, I believe that it was your actions that allowed me to reach a point where I reached out for love and affection from another woman. So I don't feel an apology for that is warranted. What I do want to apologize for is the pain and hurt that relationship caused you. I do care for you and I always will. I do not ever want to hurt you intentionally or otherwise." Luke turned in his seat so that he was facing her directly. Looking into his eyes, it was easy for Margaret to see the pain and sadness. She felt a numbness spreading throughout her entire body. Even breathing was becoming difficult. With tremendous simplicity, Luke spoke. "I still love you, but I must be honest with you and myself. I am no longer in love with you. I look at the great years we enjoyed together, and even though they outnumber the past few years greatly, the destruction is total. Margaret, I'm sure as time passes, I will be able to forgive you, and you are right that I will never forget. You must understand that I could not live with the fear that you would eventually meet another Evan. I cannot take that chance. It would destroy me, and I would never be able to recover. Today I can recover and go on with my life. I must admit that I had hoped that somehow we could say the words that would change things. I didn't hear those words, and I believe that you will admit that you didn't hear them either. You will be served early next week, so you should go see an attorney as soon as you can. I pray that we can make this difficult episode in our lives non-combative and move on. We are not even middle-aged as yet, so I believe that we each can meet someone that we can love, honor, respect, and grow old with. They both stood, and he held his arms open for her. Margaret flung herself into his embrace where he held her while she sobbed quietly. Eventually, he took her face in his hands and with great tenderness, kissed her on the forehead. "I'm sorry, but there is no other way." Then he released her, and with sagging shoulders and slow steps walked back into the house and out of her life. Sad to say, they never did find that person to grow old with. Their children did grow up and become successful in their lives. They married and gave Luke and Margaret grandchildren, and the grandchildren were joy to them both. They eventually became friends again over time, but both never attempted any reconciliation. They enjoy each other's company for brief periods, but have learned that anything longer brings back to many memories, both good and bad. Silently, they both agreed that a successful reunion would have been unattainable. Kelly met and married her one true love and is happily married today. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.